Before Robert Baratheon ever stepped through the gates of Winterfell, Ned Stark knew the old lie was finally becoming too dangerous to keep. For 16 years, Jon Snow believed he was only a bastard, the unwanted son hidden in plain sight. But with the king riding north, the Lannisters closed behind him, and every secret in Winterfell about to be tested, Ned makes one choice that changes the fate of the Seven Kingdoms. He tells Jon the truth. Not later, not at the Wall, not when it is already too late, but before Robert arrives. Because Jon is not just Ned Stark's bastard. He is Lyanna's son, Rhaegar's blood. A hidden prince carrying a name that could start another war. Welcome to Game of Theories. Subscribe now for more powerful Game of Thrones what-if stories, because in this timeline, one truth spoken early may either save Jon Snow or destroy House Stark forever.
The raven came at dawn, and by midday Eddard Stark understood he could no longer keep the promise the way he had kept it for 16 years. He read the letter in the solar, alone, with the shutters open to the cold morning, and the sound of the hunting horns down in the yard where Robb and Jon were at practice. The ink had bled from the damp. Lysa Arryn's hand, small and stabbing, reached across the parchment like a knife. Jon Arryn was dead. The Lannisters had killed him. The king was coming north. Ned lowered the parchment to the table and placed his palm flat upon it, as though he might press the words back into silence. He kept his hand there a long time. He had trained himself for 16 years to keep his face as still as a weirwood's, and even alone, with only the wind for witness, the mask held. Only his breathing betrayed him, and only to himself, Jon Arryn, who had fostered him as a boy. Jon Arryn, who had raised a raven over Gulltown and called the Vale to war for Robert. Jon Arryn, who had stood godfather to Robert's drunken oaths and to Ned's silent ones. Dead. And Robert, of all the things he could do in his grief, was riding north. He was coming to Winterfell. He was coming, Ned knew, to make him hand. Robert hated kings landing the way a bear hates a cage, and he trusted no one in his court save his old friend in the north. That much Ned could predict. He had read Robert for 20 years, and even in the king's letters these days, coarse and rambling, there was always the same quiet plea: come south. Be my brother again. What Ned had not predicted, what he could not have predicted, was what his own son would look like when the king's eyes fell upon him. He stood. He left the solar and went down the turnpike stair and out through the cold hallway, under the old stone lintel worn smooth by centuries of Stark shoulders brushing it, and into the godswood. He went by the long way, past the guest house, because he did not want to be seen. The snow crunched under his boots. The ravens in the rookery quarreled above him like old wives. When he reached the weirwood, he stood a while beneath its red eyes and did not speak. There was no need. He thought of Lyanna. She had been 15 when Rhaegar crowned her at Harrenhal. 16 when she was taken, or when she went. Ned had never been entirely sure which, and his certainties had decayed further with each year of knowing what came after. 17 when he found her in the Tower of Joy, with the last of Aerys's Kingsguard dead outside the door and a bed of blood beneath her body. She had been 17 when she died. His sister, younger than Jon was now. Promise me, Ned. He closed his eyes, and there she was, her hand like wet snow in his, her dark hair damp on the pillow, the winter roses gone to rot in the window. Promise me. Her voice thin as wind through a shutter. He had promised. He had given her his word like a man fastening a door against a storm, not knowing the storm would blow for 16 years without stopping. He had kept her secret. He had made Catelyn hate him a little every day for 16 years. He had let a boy grow up a bastard in his father's own hall, because the truth would have turned Robert's love into a hammer and brought that hammer down on a child's skull. Robert had already smashed the skulls of Rhaegar's 2 other children. Their mother's murder, Ned had never quite been able to forgive. Their father's murder he had forgiven only because his sister had asked him to. The rest he had wrapped in silence, until today he opened his eyes. Through the branches, he could see the smoke of the forge and hear the ring of hammers. Somewhere down in the courtyard, a boy was laughing Bran or Rickon, he could not tell from here. A crow went over, black against the pale sky. He watched it until it vanished behind the first keep. He thought of the small council as he had left it 15 years ago, after he had ridden south with Robert, and then ridden home as fast as his horse would go. The men who sat at that table now were not men he trusted. Pycelle had served 2 Targaryen kings before he served Robert, and would serve a third. Ned did not doubt, if a third came in strength. Varys the eunuch had been Aerys's whisperer before Robert's, and no one alive, not even Robert himself, knew to whom Varys had sworn his real allegiance, if he had sworn it to anything at all. Petyr Baelish, that clever boy who had bled for Catelyn's hand and kept the bruise hidden ever since, had his long fingers in every purse and every brothel in the city. Renly was too charming to have a conscience. Stannis was too cold to have friends. Jaime Lannister, who in the last hour of Aerys's reign had cut his own king's throat, still wore the white cloak he had stained that day, and smiled at it in the glass each morning, for all Ned could tell. These were the men Robert wanted him to sit among. These were the men who would sit at a high table with Eddard Stark and take his measure and ask, idly, about his household, about his sons, about the dark-haired boy the hand left behind. Any of them could destroy Jon with a letter, and some of them would. He thought of Catelyn. 15 years of a false face at his own hearth. His wife had been a good wife. She had given him 5 children and run his household and loved him in her sharp Tully way. And the one thing she had not forgiven him, and had not been able to forgive him, was the boy sleeping under the same roof as her true-born sons. Ned had endured her bitterness the way a man endures a sore joint, because he could not heal it without opening the wound that held it closed. He would endure it longer yet. Robert would come with 100 men and a queen and her brother and her twin and her dwarf brother and her children, and they would stay a fortnight at least, perhaps a moon. They would eat at the Stark table. They would walk the Stark galleries. They would see the Stark sons at practice. And Robert, whose grief for Lyanna was the one part of him that had not grown fat or foolish with age, would look across the yard one afternoon, and he would see a boy of 16 with a long, Stark face and the gray eyes he had loved all his life, and he would say, idly, to whoever was next to him, "Who is that?" And someone would say, "That is Ned's bastard," and Robert would look again because Robert, drunk or sober, had an eye for what reminded him of her, and that would be the first pebble in an avalanche. Robert would not guess. Robert was too large a man to suspect. But there were smaller, sharper men in his train. Varys, who had a spider's patience for a secret as old as this one. Cersei, who had lived among secrets like a swimmer among currents and could feel the pull of a hidden one across a room. Littlefinger, who had Catelyn's girlhood like a stone in his shoe and would watch the Stark household for pleasure alone. Pycelle, who had served Aerys and remembered Rhaegar's face. Any one of them might look, and Ned would not be at Winterfell. If he took Robert's offer, and he would take it, because he could not refuse Jon Arryn's memory, then he would ride south. He would ride south with some of his children, and he would leave Winterfell to Catelyn and a boy who still answered to the wrong name. A boy who must, before another hour passed under his father's roof, begin to understand the weight he carried. Ned knelt. He did not pray. The old gods did not take prayers in words, only in silences, and he had given them many silences in his life. He placed his palm on the roots and breathed, and he rose again, and he walked out of the godswood with his decision made. He did not find Jon in the yard. He found Robb and Theon Greyjoy lounging on a fence with his arms crossed, smirking down at a blunt sword one of the stable boys had dropped. Robb, bare-armed in the cold with that tully red already dark with sweat, saw him first and lowered his sword. Behind him, Sir Roderick Castle was barking at a pair of guardsmen who were failing with great seriousness to form up in a straight line. "Father, where is Jon?" Robb's smile came up and fell when he saw Ned's face. "Oiling the tack. I beat him twice running and he said it was because the leather was dry. I told him he was dry." "Twice," Ned said, "twice out of 5. Robb had the grace to lower his eyes. "He won the other 3. Tell him the truth next time. It will sting him harder and help him more." "Yes, father, thank you." Ned turned to go. "Is something wrong?" "No." A pause. "Keep working. Hard. Theon, your left is lazy again." Theon's smirk loosened half a notch and reformed. "My lord," he drawled, touching his brow with 2 fingers in a salute that managed, as always, to be 9 parts insolence and 1 part charm. Theon Greyjoy had lived in Winterfell since he was 10, and Ned had come to think of him as a tame hawk, fed and jest, but never quite his own bird. Ned crossed the yard to the stable. He had to pass within a pace of the old oak rain barrel, and he had to duck beneath the low lintel at the armory door. And by the time he came to the long, low room where the tack hung on its pegs and the smell of neatsfoot oil and horse sweat made the air close and warm, he had his face composed. Jon was at the end of the aisle, a bridle in his lap, a rag in one hand. He looked up. He had Ned's long face. He had Lyanna's eyes, though no one but Ned knew that, to every other living Stark, they were Stark eyes, gray and winter-bright. He had Lyanna's mouth when he smiled, which he did less than he ought to. He was 16. He was still growing. He had a jaw like a rough-cut blade, not yet polished by his coming manhood. There was a smudge of oil on his thumb. There were other boys of the household in the stable, 2 stable lads, a squire of the castle line, and old Hullen with a withered hand on a pitchfork. Ned felt their eyes and did not look at them. He stopped at the end of the aisle and waited until the 2 lads had found urgent business elsewhere, and Hullen, who read Ned's face as well as any living man, carried his pitchfork out without being asked. "Father, put the tack down. Come ride with me." Jon blinked. Now. Jon set the bridle on the bench with care, the way he set all his things, as though nothing of his was allowed to be thrown. He followed without a word. When they came out into the yard, Ned called to the groom for 2 good horses, his own gray and Jon's roan. Robb lifted his head from across the yard, puzzled, and Ned raised a hand. "Stay." Robb nodded, confused, and went back to Theon. They left through the east gate, the 2 of them, with Ghost trotting silent at Jon's stirrup. The direwolf had grown fast over the summer, taller than a hound and still lean, his red eyes bright as coals in the pale light. Ned noted, as he had noted in 1,000 small ways, how Ghost never left Jon's side, how the wolf did not even follow his own littermates into the yard unless Jon went with them. A wolf of the old north, a white one as the Stark children had first found them, as it had all been arranged by something older than Ned's lies. They did not speak for the first mile. Ned took the road that skirted the wolfswood, and then, at the low stone marker, he turned off it onto a trail that only a northerner who had ridden as a boy would know. The path wound up through brown pine and naked birch and old black oak, past a tumbled fieldstone wall where the forest had swallowed a farm 200 years ago, to a small open place where, in summer, the light fell gold between the trees. It was not summer. The ground was crusted with old snow and fresh needles, and their horses' breath came as smoke. Once, far off through the trees, Jon saw a flash of brown, a stag maybe, or a wild boar, and Ghost's head snapped up, but the direwolf did not leave them. Jon's hand moved unconsciously to the hilt of his sword. then relaxed. Ned watched that unconscious motion and filed it away with a quiet pride he would not speak aloud. The boy was a swordsman already. Sir Roderick had told him so 3 moons ago. The boy had the steadiness you could not teach. He had it from Lyanna, Ned thought, and from his father too, though Ned had never liked to think of that side of it before. Rhaegar had been a swordsman, by all the old tellings. Rhaegar had broken many men's guards at Harrenhal before he was unhorsed in his brother-in-law's joust. That blood lived in Jon's wrists. They passed a cairn of moss-covered stones where Ned had, as a boy, once hidden from his lord father for an afternoon because he had broken a vase. He almost said it, and did not. There would be time, later, for the small stories of boyhood. Today was not the day. He dismounted. Jon did the same. Ghost paced a wary circle of the clearing and settled on his haunches by a fallen log, watching the road they had come up. "Father," Jon said carefully, "what is this about?" Ned looked at him a long moment. "Jon," he said, "I have lied to you your whole life." Jon's mouth opened. It closed. Ned watched the color come up in his cheeks and then drain out again. He had rehearsed these words 100 times in his mind over the last hour, and none of the rehearsals had prepared him for the boy's face. "About what?" Jon said, and his voice came out the way it had when he was 9 and hurt and pretending not to be. "About your mother." The clearing became very quiet. Somewhere, high up, a crow cried once and fell silent. Ned drew his cloak tighter, not for cold. He took a long breath. "Sit down, Jon." "I'll stand." "Sit." Jon sat on the log stiffly, his hands clenched on his knees. Ghost moved to him at once and put his head on his boot. "I made a promise," Ned said, "at the end of a rebellion to a woman dying of childbed in a tower in Dorne. She was my sister. She was your mother." Jon did not move. He was looking at Ned as though at a stranger, and the coldness in his eyes was a coldness Ned had earned. Very quietly he said, "Lyanna." "Yes, Lyanna. You told me she was a tavern girl. You told me she was a camp follower. You told me you would not say her name." "I told you a great deal, Jon. None of it was true." "Why?" "Because your life was the price of a lie, and I could not raise the price." Jon looked away. He looked at Ghost. He looked up through the bare branches at the gray-white sky. He looked at his hands, and then he looked at Ned, and his eyes were rimmed with red, but no tears had fallen yet. Ned had never seen anything hurt him more precisely. "I am her son," Jon said. "I am Lyanna's son." It was not a question. It was a boy trying to carry a weight by naming it. "You are." "Then," Jon stopped. His jaw set hard. "Then who was my father?" Ned had known this question would come. He had known it for 16 years. He had imagined it spoken 1,000 ways, screamed, wept, whispered, demanded. Hearing it now in Jon's own voice, low and steady, with the old Stark composure that Jon had stolen from him like a coat from a peg, Ned found that he could not say the words he had rehearsed. He said instead, "What do you remember of the stories they tell at hearth of Prince Rhaegar?" Jon's face did not change. Somewhere in his chest, Ned felt something like a door closing. "Rhaegar Targaryen," Jon said slowly, "who stole Lyanna from her betrothed at Harrenhal." His voice did not shake, and this was worse than shaking. "Who took her to the Tower of Joy. Who was killed at the Trident by King Robert's hammer." "Yes, that is the story." "Yes. Is it true, parts of it?" "Which parts?" "He was killed at the Trident." Ned's own voice was uneven now. "He did not steal her, she went with him." "Whether she went willingly or whether, it does not matter now, Jon. I was not there, only they were there. What I know is what she told me in her last hour and what I saw in her eyes when she told me. She loved him. Whether he deserved it or not, she loved him." "Rhaegar Targaryen," Jon said. The syllables fell from his mouth like a crown he was trying on for size. "Yes, married to Princess Aelia of Dorne. Yes, so I am." Jon's mouth twisted, and for a moment Ned saw, to his astonishment, Not grief or rage, but something wry and exhausted, as though Jon had been pulling on a rope for years and had finally felt it go slack in his hand. "I am a bastard after all, just not yours." "No." Jon looked up sharply. "They were wed," Ned said. "Before a septon of the faith and before the heart tree both. Lyanna told me with the last strength she had, and she made me swear. Rhaegar put aside Aleia in the sight of the old gods and the new, and he took Lyanna for his wife." He paused. Every word tasted of iron. "You are their son. You are their true-born son." Jon did not speak for a long time. Ghost whined once very low, and Jon put his hand on the direwolf's head without looking at him. "That is treason," Jon said at last to say. "Yes. If Robert heard you say that, he would kill you." "Yes. If he knew I was," Jon did not finish, "he would kill you first. And then everyone who knew Catelyn, Robb, the girls, Bran and Rickon." Jon spoke almost conversationally, as a boy reads a ledger. "The Maester, the stable boy who held your horse when you rode back with me from Dorne, everyone." "Yes," Jon swallowed. He pressed the heel of his hand against his eye. "That is why you didn't tell me. That is why I didn't tell you, and that is why I am telling you now, because the king is coming. Because the king is coming. And because he may stay a month at my table. And because after a month of that my table will no longer hold the weight of the lie. And because he wants me to ride south with him. And because if I go south, I cannot watch over you. You need to know what you are, Jon. You need to know before he comes through my gates, because a man who knows the price of his own face cannot afford to wear the wrong one." Jon laughed. It was the ugliest sound Ned had heard his son make. "Is that what I am now, a price?" "You are my nephew," Ned said. "You are Lyanna's boy. You are the only piece of her left in the world. You are also, whatever else you are, a man whose existence ends 3 dynasties. Yes, Jon, you are a price. You have been a price since you drew breath. I have paid that price every day of 16 years by letting my wife hate me and letting you sit below the salt at my hearth, and I have paid it willingly. Now it is your turn to learn what it costs." Jon's eyes filled. He turned his face away so Ned would not see, which was so like Lyanna that Ned had to look away himself. When he looked back, Jon said steadier, "Did she name me?" "She did." "What did she name me?" Ned felt the old wound open. "Ye Harrys. For the old king who made peace between the Seven and the North." He swallowed. "I could not use it. I named you Jon, after Jon Arryn. Because he was the only man alive I would have let you become if I could not raise you myself, and because no one would ever wonder at a Jon in a Stark hall. Ye Harrys." Jon said the name under his breath, shaping his mouth around it, and then he said nothing. "Do you hate me?" Jon looked up. His eyes were wet, but his voice was quiet and clear. "I am going to," he said. "Later, I haven't yet. I think I will a little tomorrow, and then I will stop." He took a breath. "Because if you had told me when I was 12, I would have said it out loud before I was 13 and killed us all. And because you didn't tell Catelyn, which means you chose me over her every night for 16 years, and I don't," he faltered. "I don't know how to hold that." Ned reached out, hesitated, and then put his hand on his nephew's shoulder. Jon did not pull away. "You hold it," Ned said, "by not being broken by it. You are a Stark where it matters, Jon. You were raised a Stark. Whatever dragon your father's blood gives you, the wolf is yours. It was not stolen. My father was your grandfather, Lyanna was your mother, Benjen is your uncle, you will always be those things. And Robb is your cousin." Jon made a sound that was half laugh and half something else. "Gods, I grew up wanting to be him. He grew up wanting to be you. You never noticed because you were too busy feeling sorry for yourself." Jon laughed. This time it was a real laugh, surprised out of him, and it broke something hard in his face. He wiped his eye with the back of his wrist. "Catelyn must never know. Not because I'm angry with her. She was good to me in her own cold way when she had to be. But she would not be able to hide it. Not from Robert if he asked her plainly. not from a septon if she went to confession. She has not had 16 years of a mask. She would carry the truth like a torch in a tinder room. It is no insult to her, it is simply the truth. And Robb and Sansa and Arya and Bran and Rickon. They cannot know, not one of them, not yet, perhaps not ever, depending on how the world falls. Benjen, Ned considered. Benjen in time, not yet. He is your uncle by blood, and I would trust him with my life. But he is at the wall, and the watch has many ears, and he speaks freely when he is in his cups. When the world is steadier, I will tell him. Not before. The wall. Jon's voice flattened. I was to take the black. You cannot take the black now. Jon looked up sharply. Why not? Because you are a Targaryen, Jon. Because the wall is a magnet for Targaryens, and Maester Aemon is still alive there, and he was Rhaegar's great uncle, and blood knows blood in ways blood does not always speak of. Because the watch has 2,000 men, and perhaps 100 of them are honest, and the rest are murderers and oath-breakers and thieves, and any one of them for a pardon would sell you to Robert the moment your cloak touched your shoulders. Because you would be in a cage whose door was closed forever, and a cage that narrow is not a place for the last dragon. I am not the last dragon. Jon's mouth twisted. I have aunts and uncles, viceroys, the girl deaneries, across the narrow sea, my father's sister and brother. He was working it out as he spoke, and Ned heard him do it, as a boy does arithmetic aloud. My cousins are dead. Aegon, the baby, and the girl Rhaenys, the mountain. Yes, they killed them in front of Alia. Yes. Jon's face did something then that Ned did not have a name for. It was not grief. Grief was an old tenant in the Stark face, and Ned knew its every furniture. This was something else, something hard and almost abstract. A boy imagining a baby boy's head against a wall because that baby was his brother by another mother, and imagining the soldier who did it, and imagining the king who rewarded it. A small, cold calculation was happening behind Jon's eyes that Ned did not altogether like and did not altogether dislike. Robert rewarded the man who killed them, Jon said. Robert looked the other way. Tywin Lannister presented the bodies, wrapped in crimson cloaks because the blood would not show. Robert said, I see no babes, only dragon spawn. Jon looked at his hands. The oil smudge was still on his thumb. He would do the same to me. He would do worse to you. You are older. You would be given a trial first. A trial at King's Landing. Jon's mouth twitched one corner the way Lyanna's had. How quickly would the headsman sharpen his axe before the trial began? They were both silent. In the clearing the light had shifted. The sun, such as it was, had moved a handspan lower and fringed the tops of the pines with a thin, dull gold. The wind picked up and turned over a few dead leaves at their feet. Ghost lifted his head. His ear flicked. A deer, somewhere in the wood. Father. Jon said, and then he stopped. Ned watched him test the word in his mouth. Keep it there. I am going to keep calling you father, not for my sake, for everyone else's. If I slip once in the wrong company, we all die. That is wise. And in here, Jon touched his chest. I will call you what you are. My father's oldest friend's brother, my uncle who chose me. I will keep both names the way you kept both names for 16 years. Ned felt his throat close. He nodded, not trusting his voice. Jon pressed his palms down on his knees and took a slow breath, the way a swordsman breathes before a bout. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. It was not a boy's voice. It was not a prince's voice either, not yet. It was a man's voice, the voice of someone who had just taken up an unfamiliar sword and found that it fit his hand. Tell me everything, he said. Tell me the rest. Harrenhal, the trident, who knew, who guessed, who is dead, who is not, all of it. I need to learn it like a battlefield, because I have been walking across a battlefield my whole life without knowing there were corpses under my feet. Ned told him. He told him, sitting on the log beside him, with Ghost stretched between them, the whole of it as he knew it. Harrenhal, where Rhaegar had won the tourney and crowned Lyanna with blue roses in front of her betrothed. The vanishing on the Kingsroad a year later, whether seized or fled Ned still did not know. The letters that had not come. Brandon's ride south, mad with rage and his death in King Aerys's pyre and grandfather Rickard's, the old lord roasting in his own armor while his son strangled himself trying to reach a sword. The war that had followed. The battles, the stony sept, the trident, the sack. Tywin Lannister's gift of babies. Rhaegar gone from his wife, from his first children, from the world, dying in the river with rubies scattering down the current. The Tower of Joy, where 3 of the finest Kingsguard who had ever lived had chosen to stand for a pregnant woman and a dead prince rather than ride south to save Aerys. Arthur Dayne, Oswell Went, Gerald Hightower. Ned named them to Jon as though giving him a legacy of ghosts. Howland Reed, and he had walked out of that tower alive. Only them. Lyanna in the bed of blood, the promise, the babe in his arms, Starfall to return the sword, the long ride north, the cradle made and rocked by a wet nurse who had not known whose child she fed. Catelyn's white face when she first saw the boy, the lie. He told Jon of what he had suspected and could not prove. That Rhaegar had believed in a prophecy, that Rhaegar had wanted 3 children for a song he thought would save the world, that Rhaegar had perhaps not been a thief so much as a man chasing a ghost of his own. He told him of Viserys and Daenerys, the Targaryen children who had fled across the narrow sea with their mother and lived now. Last he had heard, in Pentos or somewhere the wind blew them. Viserys was a pauper prince. Daenerys was still a girl. Rumors said Viserys sold his sister to any sellsword with a sword wet enough to buy her. Ned had ignored the rumors. It was not his business, he had told himself, and he had known even as he told himself that he was being a coward. He told him of the small council as he knew it. He told him of Varys and Littlefinger and Pycelle and Renly Baratheon, and what he suspected of each. He told him of Stannis Baratheon's sudden absence from King's Landing, a signal Ned did not yet understand. He told him of the raven from Lysa Arryn that morning. He told him of the Lannisters and Jon Arryn. He told him everything. By the time he finished, the light had leaned. Jon did not move for a while after. His face was wet. He did not try to hide it now. "One more thing," Ned said quietly, because he had saved this thing for the end. "Tell me. If I fall when I am in the south, and I may fall, there is a man in the neck called Howland Reed, Lord of Greywater Watch. He was with me at the tower. He is the only other man alive who knows what you are. He loved my sister as I loved her. If I die and you are in peril, go to him. He will hide you as long as you live. He will give his life for yours before he gives your name." "Howland Reed," Jon said. "Yes, I will remember." They were silent a breath. Then Jon said with a twitch of something that was not quite a smile, "What name does he call me in his mind when he thinks of me? Lyanna's boy, I expect. He does not trade in titles." "Good." Jon nodded, more to himself than to Ned. "I would rather he called me that than anything else. He will say the name I gave you when he speaks to you. He is not a fool. And the true name, only he and I know it. Now you do." "3 men," Jon said quietly, "in all the world." "3 men in all the world," Ned agreed. "And the old gods, and your mother, wherever she is now." Jon's gaze traveled to the weirwood branches overhead, and then down, and then away into the trees. "She chose you to keep me. She did. She chose well." Jon said it matter-of-factly, as though stating a fact about a horse or a blade. It was nearly the cruelest kindness Jon had ever done him. Ned did not trust his voice to answer. Ned rose. His knees ached. He felt, for the first time in a long while, the weight of being 40. Jon stood after him. They looked at each other a moment in the gold-fringed dusk. "Father." "Yes, thank you." The word struck Ned with more force than he had expected. He could not answer for a moment. Then he drew Jon into his arms, the way he had not done since Jon was a small boy, the way he had not dared do in front of Catelyn or anyone at all for years, and held him. Jon was nearly his own height now. His son by promise, his sister's boy, his kinsman and stranger returning to him all at once. "You are Stark," Ned said into his hair. "Whatever else, you are Stark. The old gods know you and the North knows you and I know you. That is enough until it is not." "I am Stark," Jon said, and then very low, so low Ghost's ears did not even move, "and Targaryen. Yes. And whatever else they will call it when they find out, I will make sure they do not find out, not until I choose." Yes, they mounted. They rode back down the wolfswood trail together, Ghost loping between them, and they said very little. By the time they came out onto the open road, Jon had his Stark face on again, the face he had carried so well for so long, but tighter now, better fitted, as though he had finally been told what it was for. Ned glanced across at him once in the fading light, and saw his sister in his son's profile the way he had seen her in it every day for 16 years. And he felt, for the first time since the Raven had come, something other than dread. He felt the old, hard, stubborn thing he had learned in his father's hall and never quite lost. That a man's duty was not to win, but to stand where he ought to stand, for as long as he could. They rode in silence up through the Hunter's Gate. The banners of House Stark snapped above them, gray on white, and behind the banners the sky was the dull bruise color of a storm gathering in the south. In the outer ward, Robb ran up to meet them, breathless, a stable boy at his heels. "Father, Jon." A rider came. "He says the king's party is 4 days out. Mother is in a state. The whole South Keep needs to be opened and aired, and Jon, you look as though you've seen a ghost." "Where did you two go?" "To see a clearing," Ned said. "Only a clearing. It is an old clearing." Jon said, with a smile Ned had not seen on him before, not a bastard's smile, not even a boy's. "My father was showing me the lay of it." Robb nodded, already distracted by the news he had brought. "Come on. Mother wants everyone in the hall. The girls are fighting about dresses." Arya kicked a washerwoman. There is so much to do, and, oh, I forgot, Theon broke a lance on the jousting target again. A new one. "Then he can replace it," Ned said. Robb laughed and ran off. They turned their horses to the stable. Hullen came out to take the reins and did not meet Ned's eye. There was a woman hurrying across the ward with a basket of linens, one of Catelyn's women, Jane by name, and she curtsied without slowing her steps. Farther off, Bran was scaling a wall he had been told a dozen times not to scale, and old Nan was shaking a wooden spoon at him from below. Rickon was riding a stick. Someone, somewhere, had set a cauldron on a spit too close to the kitchens, and the fat was cracking. Winterfell moved around Ned with the thoroughness of an organism that had lived in its skin for 8,000 years. Jon dismounted more slowly than he usually did. His hand lingered on Ghost's head as the direwolf paced a slow circle of the stable door. "They're going to notice." Jon said quietly without looking up. "Notice what?" "That I am different today. Then be different tomorrow as well, and the day after and the day after that, until it is not different. A change everyone sees all at once is a door. A change that has always been there is a wall. Be a wall, Jon." "A wall," Jon almost laughed. "A wall, that at least is a Stark thing. Walls are a Stark thing." Jon watched him a moment longer, gray-eyed, stark-faced. "My brother," he said softly, tilting his head toward the hall where Robb had run. "Your cousin," Ned said softly back. "My brother." Jon said again and went after Robb into the throng. Ned stood alone a moment longer in the ward, looking up at the storm that was coming. The banners, gray and white, rippled above him. The forge hammered. Down at the kennels, a hound was barking itself hoarse over nothing. He breathed in the old familiar smell of his home. Horse and pine and smoke and rust. 4 days, the rider had said. 4 days, and Robert would be through these gates with his queen and his children and his cold uncles, and Winterfell would no longer only belong to Winterfell. Then he shouldered the weight of his house, and followed his sons into the hall. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Masks and Kings. The king came through the hunter's gate with 200 horse and a dozen wagons, and a litter of dwarf hounds yapping from the baggage train, and the banners of every great house of the crownlands fluttered over the line like a parade of dying birds. Jon stood at the far end of the greeting party, where a bastard stood, with his cloak pulled to his shoulder and his face as still as the wall behind him. Ghost sat beside him, red eyes on the king. 3 days ago, Jon had watched those banners ride into Winterfell in his mind 100 times, and in every imagining he had felt himself shrink. He did not shrink now. He had come to understand, in the long hours since his father had taken him into the wolfswood, that a mask did not make a man smaller, it made him more precise. Robert Baratheon dismounted with the impatience of a fat man who has been in a saddle too long. He had been, Ned had told Jon once, the strongest man Ned had ever known. He was still a large man, but the shape had spread. The war hammer that had broken Rhaegar's breastplate in the trident hung from the saddle of a squire behind him. Its head was the size of a small child's skull. Jon let his eyes rest on it a moment and then moved them on. Ned went down to a knee and bowed his head. "Your Grace." "Ned." Robert caught him under the elbow and drew him up, then wrapped him in an embrace that made Ned look, for a breath, like a man being rescued from drowning. "Get up." "Gods, you've gone gray." He stepped back and struck Ned's shoulder. "You've gone gray and I've gone fat. What a sorry pair of warriors we've become. Where's your wife?" "Ah, my lady. The years have been kinder to you than to either of us." Catelyn inclined her head with a smile that Jon, watching, could tell was half a breath too careful. "Your children." Ned presented them. "Robb, Sansa, Arya, Bran, Rickon, all in order." Robert touched each of their heads, grunted approval, and looked at Sansa a little long. Sansa, who had been told she would marry the prince, was trying to see the prince without looking at him. Joffrey, behind the king, wore velvet the color of a fresh wound and a small gold circlet on hair the color of bleached straw. He was 12 or near enough, and his mouth already had the same pinched shape as his mother's. Then Robert's eyes moved along the line. Jon did not look down. He had rehearsed this. A bastard looked down. A bastard did not meet the king's eye. But a bastard who lowered his eyes in front of Robert Baratheon this afternoon would fail the first test his father had set him, because a bastard with a guilty face was worse than a bastard who held his peace. Jon kept his gaze on Robert's beard and let the gray eyes, Lyanna's eyes, God's help him, be seen if they would. Robert's glance came. Robert's glance went. Robert's brow did a small thing Jon could not read and was gone. He had seen 100 boys in 100 yards and had not yet learned to distinguish them in the moment. "Where is the crypt?" Robert said to Ned quietly. "Your Grace." "The crypt, Ned." Cersei Lannister had dismounted by then, and stood with her hand lightly on James' arm, and her mouth pressed into a small regal line as the king turned and walked away from her before she had been properly greeted. "Robert," she said. "I've been on a horse 6 weeks. Ned's got a sister in a hole and I'm going to see her. Look to the horses, James." James' jaw tightened, then smoothed into a smile. "Your Grace," he said. Jon watched it. Jon, newly schooled, watched everything. He watched Cersei's small breath of fury, watched her brother's smile that was not a smile, watched the queen's eyes slide across the courtyard and find Ned's children and count them, and rest one unhurried heartbeat on Jon himself. It was a glance like a blade drawn slowly from a sheath. It was not suspicion, it was inventory. She was noting the Stark household as a woman notes another woman's jewels. "Ned's bastard," Jon heard her murmur to her twin. He has the Stark face, James said, already half bored. He has a face. She turned her head away. Come, my sweet ones. Your lady mother wishes you indoors. A little while later, Jon watched Sandor Clegane lift Tommen down from his pony and saw the hound's scarred mouth twist at something Joffrey had said. He watched Tyrion Lannister sidle off in the direction of the kitchens, grinning already, his eyes busy. And he saw, at the far end of the train, an old fat eunuch with powdered cheeks ride a mule through the gate with his hands folded in his lap, and his eyes drifting over everything as pleasantly as a cat over a garden. Varys did not look at Jon. Varys did not look at anything. Varys simply was in the courtyard, noticing it all at once and nothing in particular. And Jon understood with a small, cold drop of his stomach that his father had not exaggerated when he had named the spider dangerous. His father was, at that moment, walking toward the crypt beside the king, both of them silent. The shoulders of two old men who had been young together once bowed a little by a shared old grief. Jon went after them. He did not try to catch them, and he did not let them see him. He followed at the careful distance of a bastard whose direwolf could move more quietly than a man. Ghost slipped through stone archways like a pale thought, and he came up into the long cold hall below Winterfell just as his father's lamp made a puddle of yellow on the face of Lyanna's statue. Jon stopped in the shadow of a pillar. He heard them before he saw them well. I should have been here, Robert was saying. His voice rolled off the stone and came back thicker. When you buried her, I should have ridden. I know I shouldn't have left her here in the cold. She was a Stark. She belongs in the cold. A Stark. A Stark, yes, I was going to, Robert coughed. I was going to make her queen, you know that, I know. I would have put a crown on her head, rubies for her hair, I had it picked out, Ned, I told the jeweler. Rubies and blue stones for, what did she call it, that flower she loved, winter roses. Yes, I would have covered her in them. She always hated being covered in anything. Robert laughed. It was the only real laugh Jon heard from him in that long, grief-heavy minute. Aye, Robert said, aye. She was that sort of girl, wasn't she? She would have hated the rubies and the crown and half of what I would have done, and then she would have kissed me for it anyway. The dragon took her from me, from all of us. I broke his breast and I could have done it 1,000 more times and it wouldn't have been enough. Jon felt Ghost's flank warm against his calf. He set his hand on the direwolf's skull and kept his breathing shallow. Ned said, He is dead, Robert. You killed him. She is dead. I know she's dead, gods damn you, I've known it for 16 years. I came here because I thought, Robert stopped. I came here because I wanted a friend to hear me say it, that's all. I don't want to say it to anyone else. Then say it. I miss her. I know, I miss her every day. Robert was silent a breath. Then he said, low and angry, I'll kill anyone who ever did anything to her. If he had 1,000 more bastards hiding somewhere. If she left, if there was a child, I'd find it. I'd find it and I'd pull its head off with my own hands. I'd feed its bones to my hounds. Do you hear me, Ned? Every one of them. Dragon spawn, every last dragon spawn. Ned did not answer. The silence went on long enough for Jon's heart to count 6 beats against his ribs. At last Ned said, I hear you. Good, Robert said. Good, because you'd have to help me do it. There's only you in the whole bloody kingdom I'd trust to hold the other end of a leash. There is only me, Ned said, in a voice so flat even Jon could not rate it, because there are very few men left alive who knew her. The lamplight moved. They were coming back. Jon slipped sideways with Ghost at his hip, through the service passage and up a turn of the stair and out into the godswood before a breath had gone out of him. And by the time his father came up the main stair alone, Jon was standing with his back to a weirwood, stroking Ghost's head, face set. When he looked up, his father was there. Ned studied him a moment. There was blood in both their cheeks, you heard. All of it, the last part. Ned closed his eyes. Jon said, I will bury it. I heard nothing, father. I know. He meant it, though. He means everything and forgets it in a month. Not this. No, not this. They stood together a while. Then Ned said quietly, "Walk with me. The feast is tonight." Jon walked. At the feast Jon sat at the end of the lower table as he always had. This time he sat there on purpose. He poured his own wine, ate slowly, watched everyone. Sansa bloomed pink under Joffrey's attention at the high table. She asked the prince a polite question about his horse, and Joffrey gave her an answer that made her laugh in the way girls laugh when they have decided, in advance, that a man will be charming. Jon noted the way Joffrey's smile afterward dropped as though it cost too much to keep up. He noted, too, the way Sandor Clegane stood at his master's shoulder and drank without seeming to drink, eyes traveling up and down the hall. Arya threw a chicken bone at Sansa. Sansa shrieked. Catelyn pretended not to have seen. Rickon crawled under the table. Bran refused to sit still. Robb drank too fast. Ned watched his wife laugh with the Queen and not quite smile with her eyes. Theon Greyjoy laughed too loudly at every joke the Hound did not make. At some point between the third course and the fourth, a page boy leaned to Jon's elbow and set a second cup beside his first. "From Lord Tyrion, my lord." Jon looked up the table. Tyrion, catching his eye, lifted his own cup in a small salute and winked. Jon raised his cup in return and drank, and did not drink again. The kindness registered. The pattern behind the kindness registered too. In the new shape of the world that Jon had been given, kindness that was offered without request was almost always a question. A little later a knot of the king's knights came to the low end of the hall, too drunk to keep to their own bench, and one of them, a broad man with a red nose and the badge of House Trant, dropped heavily onto the bench across from Jon and squinted at him. "Ned's boy," the knight said. He was Lord Meryn, Jon thought, a member of the Kingsguard by the white of his cloak, though the white was spattered with gravy at the shoulder. "The Whoreson." "Sir, you've got the Stark face." "I'm told, sir, and you're off to the Wall." "Yes, sir, good place for bastards." "Good place for anyone no one wants." He laughed at his own wit, found the laugh did not travel, and filled his cup again. "I was at the Wall once, on an errand, cold as a whore's conscience. You'll hate it, boy." Jon thought of a dozen answers and gave none of them. He simply inclined his head. Sir Meryn looked him over once more, satisfied himself of nothing at all, and rolled off down the bench with his cup. Jon watched him go, and when he turned back to his plate he caught, at the high table, Tyrion Lannister's sidelong glance. The dwarf's mouth made a tiny wry twist. He had heard the exchange. He was marking, Jon realized, how Jon carried a slight. It was another small, ordinary test. It had been, he guessed, half the reason for the second cup. Jon ate one slow bite more and did not look up. He let Tyrion mark whatever Tyrion was going to mark. There was nothing to be done about that now. The king ate and drank and shouted for more, and at one point with a woman on each knee, his wife at the high table on one hand, a serving girl pulled down on the other knee halfway through a song. Robert roared across the hall, "Ned! Ned, you dour, bloody, cold-faced northern bastard, come up here and drink with me, or I'll drag you up by that beard." Ned went. Jon kept his eyes down. The Queen's eyes, high above the hall, passed over Ned and over the king's serving girl and over the Queen's own hand and came to rest for a blink again on Jon. He did not look up. He knew she was looking. He felt it on his hair. Inventory, he thought. Later, on the battlements above the yard, the wind carried the sound of the feast up in wet ribbons and let it vanish. Jon had slipped out early. He could not stomach the smell of the king any longer, or the sight of his father pretending to be the man Robert wanted him to be. He stood at the north face of the keep beside Ghost and looked out over the wolfswood. Somewhere far across the trees a wolf howled. Ghost did not answer. Ghost never did. A footstep came from behind him, accompanied by the faint clink of a wine cup being carried absently. "That's a fine animal," a voice said. "And rare too, I think. In the South they pay gold for an ordinary dog." Jon did not turn. "Lord Tyrion, you know me. You are the only man at the feast shorter than my sister Arya, and she is 9. Tyrion laughed the soft way he laughed. "The only man, so I am." "What are you doing up here alone, Snow? Breathing?" "A man should not breathe alone if he can help it. It is bad for the temperament. May I join you, as you like, my lord?" Tyrion hopped up to sit on a low crenellation with the ease of a man who had, all his life, found his own way to match tall men. His small booted foot kicked air. The wine in his cup did not spill. "I saw you watch the queen when she looked at you," Tyrion said conversationally. Jon's heart did not leap. Some part of him wanted to feel caught. A stronger part of him remembered his father's voice in the wolfswood. He said, "I saw her look at me. Most boys would have looked away. I am not most boys, my lord." "No," Tyrion took a sip. "You are not." Jon waited. "You are going to the wall, they tell me. Perhaps. Perhaps. A bastard of the north, a boy with a sword hand, a direwolf at his heels, and you say perhaps. Come, Snow, what is keeping you? A bit of Stark grey up there, black cloak, a sword on your belt, some rough song at Castle Black, and you'll sleep next to your Uncle Benjen and raid wildlings into your old age. It's a clean bargain for a second son. Cleaner than most." "It is a cage," Jon said before he could quite stop himself. Tyrion's eyebrow rose. "I beg your pardon, a cage," Jon said more carefully. "My father spoke of it. A man in a black cloak cannot unmake a vow. A man cannot unknow what he finds there. He is given to the wall forever. That is the general understanding of vows. Yes. I am not certain I want any door closed behind me forever, my lord. Not yet." Tyrion studied him for a long time then. His mismatched eyes moved across Jon's face in a way that was not unfriendly but was not kind either. It was the measuring look of a small, clever thing that had learned to read the larger, slower beasts around him very early. "You have been reading, Snow," Tyrion said at last. "I have always read, my lord." "No, today, this past week, you have been reading differently. I don't know what, but your eyes have the habit of a man who has started to count exits in a room." Jon's pulse gave one small hard thump and then, with discipline he did not know he had until that moment, slowed. "I was told when I was young," Jon said, "to wear my bastardy like armor so it could not be used to hurt me. I have been thinking lately that armor is better when it fits." Tyrion laughed. It was the real laugh and it sounded surprised. "Well said. I said that to you, did I?" "Yes, my lord. You had already taken the lesson. Good for you. Better for you. Excellent boy. Why are you on this cold tower alone?" "Because I was tired of my uncle the king." "The king is not your uncle. Not by blood, by drinking, I suppose. My father drinks with him. I have learned my father's ways. They did not include drinking with kings." "Your father is a wise man, wise in the dour northern fashion. My brother thinks him a stone. My sister thinks him a rival. My father, well, my father thinks of no one as a rule. I think him the last honest man in the 7 kingdoms, and I tell you this on a rooftop at night, because if I told it at dinner half of them would laugh, and the other half would spit in his cup." Jon turned his head. He made himself smile a small, tired smile. "You are kinder than men have warned me you are, Lord Tyrion. Kindness is a small currency. I have plenty. I spend it where I like. Good night, Snow. Try not to fall off the wall." "Good night, my lord." Tyrion slid down from the crenellation, tipped an imaginary cap, and vanished into the passage. His small booted footsteps, very distinctive, receded. When they had gone, Jon let his breath out slowly and set both hands on the cold stone. Ghost bumped his hip. "I know," Jon said. "He is clever. Clever enough to be dangerous, clever enough not to know yet what he is dangerous to." Ghost looked up at him. Also, he is kind. Jon laughed once under his breath. That is also dangerous. 3 days later, Bran fell. Jon did not see it happen. None of them did, except, as Ned and Catelyn would later come to guess, the one pair of eyes that should not have been there. Jon was in the yard when the shout went up from the broken tower, a long cry, a cook's voice, an unhelpful and wordless cry of terror. He ran. Ghost ran ahead of him. The whole courtyard ran. He reached Bran before Catelyn did, before even Roderick did, because he had been closest. Bran lay on the grass under the first keep like a broken doll with his hair across his forehead. His legs were wrong. Jon dropped to his knees. He did not touch him. He knew enough not to touch him. Blood was coming from Bran's ear. "Fetch Luwin," Jon said to the nearest boy, whose face was white. "Now, run. Do not stop. Go." The boy went. Jon looked up the stone face of the first keep. He had climbed that tower himself a dozen times with Bran laughing beside him. Bran would have climbed it today the way he always climbed it, going up the outside of the window ledges like an efficient spider. He would have clung on the ledge of that broken window, the window that was always supposed to be shuttered. And what he had seen had made him lose his grip. Jon stared up at the window. The shutter was half closed now. Someone had closed it. He turned his head. The yard was chaos, and at the far side of it, where the king's party was camped, Jaime Lannister was crossing the ward toward the queen's door with the unhurried, slightly damp briskness of a man who has just come down a stair. His white cloak was slung over his arm. He did not look once at the boy on the grass. Jon's eyes went to him and did not look away. Ghost, beside Jon, growled. It was a sound Ghost almost never made. A deep, low, steady rumble, the resonance of an animal who has smelled something that is itself on the prowl. Jon quietly laid a hand on the direwolf's ruff. "Not yet," he whispered. Catelyn came running with her skirts in both hands and Luwin close behind, and the yard closed around them, and Bran was taken up and carried inside, and Jon did not move from the grass for a long moment afterward. He looked at the closed shutter. He memorized the angle of the ward and the slant of the sun on the wall. He memorized the sound Ghost had made. He memorized the not-looking of the man in the white cloak. When he finally rose, his father was behind him, and Ned had seen his eyes. "Tell me later." Ned said softly, "Yes. Walk with me to the kitchens, as though we are asking about broth." They walked. In the colonnade before they reached the warmth of the kitchens, Ned slowed a fraction. Who? Jaime Lannister, coming down from the Queen's Tower not long before Bran was found. No one with him. His hand was on his belt. Ghost saw him. Ghost growled. Ned's face did not move. "What did Bran see?" Ned said, half to himself. "What in seven hells did Bran see?" "I do not know. I will find out." "Shall I watch Lannister?" "No, watch him only when he passes you naturally. Do not follow him. He is the best sword in the Seven Kingdoms, Jon. He would see you after one day and he would not forgive it." "I am told I am good." "You are very good. Not good enough for him. Not yet. Keep your head where it is for now. Watch the Queen. Watch the children. Watch the uncle." "Tyrion has been kind to me." "Tyrion is kind to everyone. It costs him nothing. Do not mistake charm for safety." "Yes. Good boy." In the night, Bran did not wake and Catelyn did not leave his side. She had not slept since the fall. Jon came to her once at midnight with a bowl of soup and was refused gently, and he did not press. He left the bowl and retreated. She had not asked him for soup, and he did not expect her to. He was in the corridor when the lamp at the far end rounded the corner and became Ned. "Father." "Walk." Ned murmured, "Your room." They walked in Jon's chamber with the door shut and Ghost lying against it. Ned took a long breath and said, "Robert has asked me to be hand. I know. I will have to go, I know. I cannot leave you here." Ned did not sit. Jon did not sit. "Catelyn has told me before this that she wants you gone of the household once I am south. She has told me plain. Until now I had thought to send you to the wall. Not now. Not now. We spoke of this, so a plan. A plan. Benjen rides north in 2 days. You will ride with him. To the wall. To the wall, yes. As a cover. We will tell the household you go to take the black. We will tell Benjen you are considering it, strongly considering it, and we will ask him to host you at Castle Black for a fortnight. In that fortnight, we will say you will meet the brothers, ride out with the rangers if he will allow it, and decide. He will not push me. He will not. He has never pushed any man to the wall. And when the fortnight is done, you will decline the vows privately to him, and you will ride down the coast with 3 men he will trust to you to Eastwatch by the sea. At Eastwatch, you will take ship. I have already written ahead in a cipher your Meister taught you to an old contact. Contact? There is a Braavosi trader who has owed me a debt for 18 years. He is in Eastwatch every quarter for salted meats. He will see that you have passage to Braavos. Braavos. Braavos is a free city. Braavos is the only city of the free cities that Robert does not know well. He knows Pentos because of the Targaryens, and he knows Murin Tyrosh because he hired sellswords there, and he has drunk in Volantes once or twice. He does not know Braavos. You will be very small there. You will find a water dancer. There is a name I will write down, and you will learn what you need to learn, and you will wait for word. From you, from me, or from Howland Reed if I fall. You know what to do then. Yes. Ned looked at him a long moment. Are you ready for this? Jon thought about it. He was 16. He had never been anywhere but the north and Moat Cailin. He had never been on a ship in his life. He had read of Braavos in the books in the library, but had never seen a picture of the Titan. He had never met any Targaryen living or dead, except in his father's telling. He had never crossed a body of salt water, he said. Yes. I will write to you under a false name. I will sign the letters Arryn. It is a name we may both mourn in private without attracting notice. You will write to me under the name Jory. No one reading will think twice. Jory. Jon allowed himself a small, sad smile. I hope Jory doesn't mind. Jory will not know. No one can know. Yes. There is one more thing. Tell me, your direwolf, he comes with me. Yes, he comes with you. He comes with you through the wolfswood and up the King's Road and into Castle Black and out again and to Eastwatch. But Ghost cannot walk the docks of Braavos at your heel. A direwolf in Braavos is a banner. Every sellsword on the Purple Harbor will remember him. You will need to board a ship that has a hold. He does not like holds. He will like them better than the axe. Ned set his hand on Jon's shoulder. I am sorry, Jon. He will bear it. If I am with him, he will bear most things. I think he will. There is nothing ordinary about that animal, Jon. I have been watching him since the day Robb pulled him out of the snow. He does not move like a hound. He does not bark like a hound. He does not eat like a hound. He watches you as a man watches a king. He is my own self, Jon said, and then heard himself, and then laughed, low and surprised. That is called a warg, Jon, in the old books. It is not. It is loyalty. Perhaps, Ned studied him. Perhaps, but you will want to ask Maester Luwin. Later in a letter under some cover I will arrange. Old Nan knows her stories better than any Maester I have ever met, but I do not want old Nan in on this business. So Luwin later. For now, only do not let the wolf out of your sight, and do not let any man see you and him behave as one for more than the length of a blink. Do you understand? I understand. Do not be. I am all the same. I was 34 when I learned the price of a promise to your mother, and I am still learning it. You are 16. You will learn it faster than I did. That is the only gift I can give you tonight. You have given me more than that, Jon said. They stood a moment more. Sleep, Ned said. Tomorrow the fitting out begins. I will have Mikken make you a sword, a real one. I cannot give you ice, but I can give you a sword of yours. I have Longclaw. That is a Mormont blade. Lord Commander Mormont offered it to me 3 moons ago. I refused because I thought I had no right. You have a right. Then I will accept it when I reach the wall. Good. Ned turned to go. At the door he stopped. Jon. Yes. Whatever you find in Bravos, whatever word reaches you from me. If it is ever forced to a choice between you and me, you live. Do you hear me? You live. That is my order. That is my first and last command as your uncle and as your father. Live. Jon swallowed. Yes. Good. He went. In the morning, Catelyn rose and went south to confront the Lannisters with the dagger found beside Bran. Jon did not see her go. He learned it only later. He did see in the yard the forging begin. Mikken ran his hammer with his teeth bared. Old sparks flew. Ghost watched the forge with unblinking red eyes, and Jon watched the king's procession preparing to leave, the baggage train being loaded, the banners being taken down and rolled in canvas. He saw, too, the attempt on Bran. It came at noon. It was an assassin with a fool's weapon, a Valyrian steel dagger, too fine for any sellsword's purse, too fine for the arsonist who tried to set the library afire to draw the household away. The arsonist's fire did not take. Maester Luwin's apprentice stamped it out within a minute of the first wisp of smoke. But the assassin climbed the tower stair while the apprentice was at the library, and the assassin came to Bran's door and found the door open and the bed occupied, and an animal inside that should not have been there. Summer, Bran's direwolf, had grown fast in Bran's long stillness. He was waiting. Jon, running up the stair when he heard the shout, arrived to see the man pinned to the floor with his throat open, and Summer crouched over him as calmly as a house cat over a mouse. There was blood on the furs. There was blood on the stone. There was no blood, not a drop, on Bran's coverlet. Catelyn, whom Jon had thought gone south, was not gone. She had been with Bran as she had been every hour of the last several days. She was bleeding from her hand where the dagger had gone through her palm when she had seized it mid-strike. My lady, Bran. Bran is unharmed. Look. Jon knelt. Bran was breathing. The coverlet was unmarked. The boy slept as he had slept for days. Catelyn's face was wax. She looked at the dead man. She looked at her own hand. She looked at Jon, and for the first time in 16 years she looked at him as if he were a person and not a grief. Summer saved him, she said. Summer saved him, my lady. You saved him first. I saved him from a man I did not know. My son is still. She did not finish. Maester Luwin came panting up the stair with a jar of salve and bandages and 2 of the household guard in his wake. The room filled. Jon withdrew to the doorway and then to the stair. He did not leave the stair. He stood 3 steps down from the landing with his back to the wall and Ghost beside him, until he heard Luwin's voice go steady with orders and Catelyn's voice go small with relief. He went then, softly, down to find his father. Ned heard the tale with his face like stone. A Valyrian dagger. Yes, father. We will send it to the south with Catelyn. She will ride tonight. She will carry it to me in King's Landing herself if I cannot come up the King's Road to meet her. He looked at Jon. This changes nothing of our plan. If anything, it hastens it. Yes. The man who sent that dagger, Ned said, is the same man who decided to push Bran from a window, and he is very close to us, closer than I had hoped. Jaime Lannister. Perhaps one who serves him. Perhaps one who wants us to think it is he. The field is crowded, Jon. That is what a cipher is for, to see who you are really playing. Go, pack. Do not speak of this to anyone outside this keep. Yes, father, good boy, be swift. He walked once past Joffrey on his way from the yard. The prince was having a tantrum at his squire about the buckle of his saddle. Joffrey's face was red, and the squire was 2 years younger than he was and crying. Joffrey called the boy a whoreson. Jon passed without turning his head. He walked once past Tyrion, who was in the library with a book the size of a pumpkin on his knees. Tyrion lifted a hand lazily. Jon inclined his head. They did not speak. He walked once past the queen quite by accident in the upper gallery. She was alone, which was unusual. She stopped. He bowed. "You are Ned's," she said. "I am your grace, the bastard." "Yes, your grace. Hm." She tilted her head to one side and her golden hair fell across her shoulder, and for a long moment she simply looked. "You are going to the wall, they tell me." "Yes, your grace." "Hm, again. Look at me." He looked. Her green eyes went slowly over his face. He did not flinch. He did not look away. He felt Ghost behind him somewhere, very still in the shadow of the wall. She said quietly, "You have your Lord Father's eyes. I have been told that, your grace. I see why they call it the Stark face." She smiled a small smile. "Go well, bastard. It is cold on the wall." "Yes, your grace." He walked on without turning his head, and when he was around the corner he allowed himself one breath that shook. Ghost caught up to him halfway down the stair. "She has seen me now," he murmured. "She has seen me, and she has filed me somewhere." Ghost pressed his flank. "Better she file a bastard going north. Better that than a prince going anywhere else." At the gate, on the morning they left, Ned and Benjen embraced once briefly, and Benjen said nothing of what Ned had asked him except a short dry, "As you please, brother." Jon understood, watching, that his father had not told Benjen the truth. Only that Jon was not yet for the wall, whatever the rumor. Benjen had asked no more. The king was there to see the Hand's household off for King's Landing. Ned and Arya and Sansa and Jory Castle and 24 men. Sansa waved at Joffrey. Arya scowled at everyone. Ned looked once at Jon and Jon looked once at Ned, and they did not otherwise speak. Catelyn was not there. She had gone her own way south. Robb, pale and strained with Bran's condition, squeezed Jon's shoulder so hard the fingers left bruises. "Come back, Jon. I will come back. Not to the wall. Here, if I can. Promise me." Jon paused. He set his hand on Robb's hand and he lied with love to his brother. "I promise." Robb's jaw went tight, but his eyes had settled. He nodded once. He stepped back. They went. The king's train turned south in a clamor of banners and hooves. The Hand's smaller column followed it as far as the first crossroads, and then split off with Ned at its head. And Jon watched his father's gray shoulders disappear around a bend of the road and did not let his face move. Then he and Benjen, with 3 men and a pack mule and Ghost, turned their horses north. The gate of Winterfell stood open behind him a long time. Jon did not look back until the towers were only a darker smudge on the horizon, and when he did look back, it was only for the length of a breath, and then he faced the road. "There will be snow before tomorrow," Benjen said, squinting at the sky. "Are you cold?" "No, uncle." "You are the only Stark I know who never claims to be cold." "Perhaps I am not a Stark." Benjen looked at him sidelong. A long, cool, considering look, older than amusement. He rode another stride before answering. "Your mother was a Stark." Jon's head did not turn. "Was she, uncle?" "Aye." Benjen said. "She was." He looked at his reins. He did not look at Jon. "I will tell you a thing, and then I will not speak of it again. My brother Eddard has asked me a favor the way he asks favors when he has stopped trusting even the wind. I do not ask what the favor is for. I asked once, and he did not answer, and a man of his sort does not answer twice. I will give him his favor. I will give you what he has asked me to give you, and I will not speak one word of it to any man in Castle Black or any man north of the wall or any god at any altar while I live. Do you understand me, nephew?" "I understand." "Good." Benjen's sigh was a puff of white in the cold. "Ha," he said again and spat over his horse's shoulder. "You are as Stark as any of us, boy, never doubt that. Come on. There is a hard road to Castle Black." Jon followed. Ghost ran ahead. The banners of Winterfell were a smear of gray behind them now, and the sky was lowering, and the first cold of the true north came down to meet them. And Jon, who had been a bastard for 16 years and a prince for 12 days, set his shoulders and rode into the hard road because a wall had been set before him, and he had learned in those 12 days what a wall was for. Chapter 2. End Chapter 3. The dragon learns to fly. The wall was higher than anything Jon had been told it would be, and colder than he had imagined, and to see it from below on a clear day was to understand for the first time what men had once believed about winter. Benjen reined in on the King's Road a mile out and did not speak for a long moment. Jon did not speak either. The wall was a sheer white cliff across the horizon, going up and up until the eye refused it, and behind it the true sky went on. Ghost stood at Jon's stirrup with his head tilted very slightly, his red eyes reading it as he had read the open sea on a map once, not quite understanding that this was real. "Men built that," Benjen said, not looking over. "It is always worth remembering." "Yes, uncle, some men, not many. Over a long time. Yes. Whatever you think you want to do with your life, boy, remember you are a creature of men, not gods, not books, not even this." He gestured at the wall. "I will remember." Benjen nodded and kicked his horse forward. They came into Castle Black at dusk. The gate rolled up for them, and Jon saw the yard he had read about: gray stone, patchy snow, black cloaks moving, and the men, when they saw who rode in, straightened without quite stopping what they did. Benjen Stark had that effect. He was the first ranger. His men did not love him exactly. Jon saw that in their eyes, the way he had learned to see, but they respected him in the practical way men respect a predator who hunts on their side. Lord Commander Mormont was in the yard, and when he saw Jon, his thick brows shot up and then settled, and he came over with a slow, deliberate stride as befits a man of his weight and office. "Snow, Lord Commander." Benjen rode ahead. "You are considering the Black." "I am, my lord." Mormont put his hand on Jon's shoulder, which was like being clapped under a shield. "You are young, and you have a sword arm that old men like me remember seeing once in our youth. Stay a fortnight. Ride out with the next ranging if your uncle is willing. Take the measure of us. Then decide." "I will, my lord." "And Snow, my lord. If you do not take the Black, I will not forget you." Mormont's gaze was level and not unkind. "Longclaw, my own sword, is Valyrian steel. I offered it to your father's house 3 moons past to be given you when you took the vows. If you take them, the sword is yours. If you do not, the offer dies with my hand on it, and that is the way it must be. I do not regret the offer. I do not regret the withdrawal. A sword is a tool. Use the one you have." "Thank you, my lord, for the honor and the truth both. Good boy." Mormont moved off. He had a bearing as heavy as a boulder coming to rest. When he stopped speaking, you felt a weight settle on the air. "Come," said Benjen. "I will show you the steps." The fortnight passed quickly and very slowly both. Jon ate with the brothers and did not make friends with any of them, because he could not afford to. He rode with Benjen up along the wall's base, and looked out through crenellations into the haunted forest, and felt the cold as a real thing, as a country of its own, and he learned the faces of the men of the watch. Some were cruel, some were kind, some were very broken. Many were hungry in the eye. He slept in the common barracks. He did not sleep well. Ghost slept at his feet. None of the brothers had ever seen a direwolf in the flesh before, and they gave him both a wide berth and an unwelcome reverence. Once a scrawny watchman tried to reach down to pet Ghost. Ghost did not growl, but lifted his head and looked at the man with an expression that had, somehow, more authority than the Lord Commander's, and the man took his hand back and found a place to be. On the second evening, Jon watched from the top of the wall as a raven came in from the south with a black message cord, and the rookery boy ran with it down the broken stair. He learned later that the message was from Lord Tywin Lannister himself to the Lord Commander. An inquiry, very polite, as to whether any northern bastards had yet taken the black. Mormont laughed a short, hard laugh when he read it aloud that night at his own fire, and then fed the parchment to the hearth and did not speak of it again. Jon went back to his bunk. He slept even less that night. On the fourth morning, a ranger came limping back from beyond the wall with 3 of his men missing, and a story the Lord Commander heard in the master-at-arms room behind a closed door. Jon was not let into the room. The ranger's eyes, when he came out, were bad, the eyes of a man who has seen a thing that his mind is now actively refusing to remember. Jon filed that too. He did not know, then, what to do with it. He knew only that a wall which cost the lives of boys for the sake of a threat most of the realm did not believe in was a place a man did not walk into without cause. He had his cause, but his cause was south and east, not north. On the 6th evening he wrote a short letter in the cipher and left it with Benjen, sealed, with an instruction to burn it unopened if Benjen did not hear from him within a year. "What am I holding, Jon?" Benjen asked. "A name," Jon said. "If I die, burn it. If I live, give it to no man until I ask for it. I will hold it. Thank you, uncle." Benjen took the packet and put it in his breast, and the matter was not spoken of again. On the 3rd evening, Jon was summoned to the rookery. Maester Aemon, when Jon came up to him, was already waiting. He was a very old man. The skin of his face was translucent. His eyes, milky and white, were blind. He sat in his high-backed chair beside the rookery fire, bundled in furs that did not quite keep the cold from reaching him, and his small, pale hands were folded over a book he had long since ceased to need to open. "Jon Snow," he said. The voice was thin and dry like wind through reeds. "Come in. Sit. The fire is poor. I am always cold these days." Jon sat in the stool Aemon's hand indicated. Ghost stayed by the door. Aemon's milky eyes did not see the direwolf, but his head turned faintly toward him as though the air had changed. "You have a wolf?" "Yes, Maester, an old breed." "Direwolf?" "Ah." The old man's voice warmed a degree. "Direwolf. They were once common this far south. My grandfather's grandfather wrote of them. They came down as far as the Trident in winter. They were kings in their own country. They do not share a hearth for long without a reason." "No, Maester." Aemon smiled. The smile made of his face a leaf that had been pressed between 2 pages for 100 years and was still a leaf. "What is your errand here, Jon Snow?" "To see whether I am suited to the black, Maester." "And are you?" "I have not yet decided." "Mm." The old hands tapped once on the book. "An honest answer. I like honest answers." "Maester." "Yes, boy." "How old are you?" 102, they tell me. 103 in the next moon, they also tell me, although I was born in the winter and no one quite knows the date. My memory is a crowded house, and the tenants argue. Jon considered his next words. He had rehearsed them for 3 nights. He knew that the old man across from him was the great-great-granduncle of his true father. He knew that this old man had been born a prince of the realm with the blood of the dragon in him, and had chosen the wall over the throne when his house had asked him, and had lived here 100 years and more, and had watched his nephews and cousins and the kingdom itself die and rise and die again. He knew he could say nothing of this, and yet he felt, in the cold little room, that Aemon was listening to something Jon had not yet said. "Maester, may I ask you something?" "Ask." "How does a man hold 2 truths at once, 2 hard truths, that he must not say aloud?" The old man's face did not change for a long moment. His pale lips moved once, not quite a smile, not quite a frown, and then he said, carefully, "Is that all?" "That is the whole of it." "Carefully." "You will make many small choices, Jon Snow. Each of them will seem, in the moment, to be no choice at all. And each of them will in fact have been a choice, and the pattern they make, in the end, will be the only answer you will ever be given to your question. You hold 2 truths at once by carrying them. You do not solve the difficulty. You carry the difficulty. One day you set it down not because you have earned it, but because the world changes and you may. You do not know in advance when that day will be. Until that day, carefully. Jon held still. "Thank you, Maester." "Are there," the old man said and paused, "two truths, Jon Snow?" Jon did not answer. Aemon did not press. He only nodded. "I have," Aemon said, "had such truths of my own, a very long time ago. I am old enough that no one thinks to ask me anything anymore, and this is perhaps the single unlooked-for blessing of 100 years. So you may tell me if you choose, and it will die here as so many other things have died here. Or you may not tell me, and we shall speak no more of it. Either choice is well." For a moment Jon almost spoke. The words formed themselves at the back of his throat. The old man's patient face was so kind, and his lonely old mind was so quick. And Jon saw, as plainly as he saw the fire, the relief and the horror of setting this thing down in this room and seeing how it looked when another pair of eyes at last beheld it. He did not speak. Instead he said, very slowly, "I will remember this conversation for the rest of my life, Maester." "That is a choice," said Aemon. "Yes. It is the wiser one for now. You have seen my face, Maester. You have not seen my face." "Ha!" The small dry laugh was mostly air. "I have heard your voice. I have heard a certain shape in your vowels that belongs to a woman I knew once, long ago, who was said to be Stark enough. And I have heard, faintly behind it, a shape that belongs to a man I knew only from rumor. I am old, Jon Snow, and blind, but I have listened to men speak my whole life, and some patterns you do not forget." Jon swallowed. "Maester, I will ask you nothing, Jon Snow. I will tell no man what I have heard. You are a Stark of Winterfell so long as the Stark of Winterfell says so, and that is all I need. If ever you have need of me, I am here, until the world finds a way to let me go. I will write to no one of you. I will keep nothing in the rookery in your name. When you leave Castle Black, and you will leave, whatever the brothers say, you will leave with my good will. That is all I can give you. It is not nothing. It is a great deal, Maester. Go, and be careful. The world is old and full of teeth." Jon rose. He bowed to the blind man, and the blind man somehow knew the bow and inclined his head. Jon turned at the door. "Maester." "Yes, Jon Snow. If ever I return, when I have," he did not find the word, "when I have carried my difficulty long enough, I will come and tell you how it fell out. I shall be glad of it. I shall not be here, but I shall be glad of it." Jon went. In the corridor, Ghost pressed against his knee. Jon set his hand on the direwolf's head and stood a moment with his eyes shut. When he opened them, he found that there were tears on his face, but they were not sorrowful tears. They were the tears a man sheds when an unknown stranger, in one small hour, has given him permission he did not know he needed. He left Castle Black 2 days later, with Benjen's blessing, 3 trusted brothers, a fresh horse, and a courier's cipher tucked in his saddlebag. No one in the barracks asked where he was going. Benjen had gone with him a piece of the way, and the men assumed he was being escorted back south. Only the Lord Commander at the gate looked at him a moment longer than was necessary. "A sword is a tool, Snow." "Yes, my lord. Use the one you have." "I will, my lord, and thank you." He rode east. The wind off the wall came down at them in a long, cold tongue for the first afternoon. And then, as they bent away from the base, the land softened a little, and the trees thickened. And the brothers they rode with began, once or twice, to hum to themselves as though to fill the silence. They did not fill it. Jon was not a filling sort of companion. At Eastwatch by the sea, the mist rose off the inlet like a gray curtain, and the ships in the harbor were gray in the mist, and the dark shape of the eastern water lay beyond like a held breath. Jon had never been to the sea. He had never smelled it. He breathed it in and felt it pass into his lungs and settle, foreign as a truth about his parents, a thing that had always existed and had simply been across the world from him until this moment. He had been given a name. A merchant, a Braavosi captain called Valinor, who would be at Eastwatch for the salted meats. The three brothers who had ridden with him took him to the inn where Valinor kept rooms when he was in port. Benjen had written Valinor ahead. Jon was not sure by what cipher, because he had not been told, and Benjen had not offered. The inn, called the Three Gulls, stood on a stone pier at the southern end of Eastwatch, and its common room smelled of wet wool and kippered herring, and the particular tar Eastwatchers used to caulk their hulls. Jon left Ghost in the stable. The direwolf did not much like stables, but did not object when Jon set his palm to his skull a moment and spoke low to him, and went in alone. Valinor was a short, thick-shouldered man with a trimmed gray beard and the purple-lidded eyes of a sailor who had stared too long into too many horizons. He read the letter he was handed. He read it twice. He looked up. Snow. Yes, Captain. Valor Morgulais. Valor Dohaeris. Jon had memorized the phrase. He had also memorized the answer. He did not know what either meant in the depth of them, but the captain's face altered a little, settled, as men's faces settle when a door they had expected to be open is in fact open. Come aboard tonight. We sail with the tide. I carry fish oil and salted cod and a cargo of bone lace. You are my nephew from White Harbor. Your name is John Rivers. You are a little slow. You will be my man in the hold for the passage. Tell your wolf to keep his teeth to himself. He will. Good. Valinor nodded once. Your lord uncle paid me 18 years ago, Snow. It was a large debt. I have always meant to pay it back. Tonight is the tide. Jon said farewell to the three brothers at the dock. The oldest of them, a gruff man called Denise, gripped his wrist. Don't die, lad. Your uncle will skin me. I will not die. Swear it on something. I swear it on my direwolf. Denise looked at Ghost, who sat attentive in the fog, and said, That will do. Denise. Aye. If a man in the king's livery comes asking after where Ned Stark's bastard has gone, he went south to take ship at White Harbor. He was sick of the cold. He wept the night before he left. He took a bad horse. He had a woman with him. A woman. Aye, Denise grinned. Why not? It makes the story sweeter. Men believe sweet stories faster than sour ones. My grandfather taught me that. He sold bad grain in good sacks for 40 years. Denise. Aye, thank you, go on, boy, before I cry and the other two see me. Go. The Mariposa. A small, fast, lean-hulled trader painted black above the waterline and white below, with a single striped lateen sail and a crew of 11, slipped out of Eastwatch's harbor on the turn of a falling tide an hour after full dark. Jon watched the torches of the fortress dwindle behind them and then vanish in the mist, and he watched the great shoulder of the wall turn blue-gray in the last light. And then he watched the water, which he had never in his life seen, go black beneath him. Ghost lay in the hold, in a nest of sacks. He did not like the motion of the sea. He did not complain. Jon went down to him every watch and spoke to him, and Ghost licked the back of his hand, once each time, and did not leave his sacks. 3 days out, Valinor invited him to the stern deck and poured him a cup of pale wine that tasted of apples, and they stood together while the sun set over the line of the wall, now only a smear in the west. You are going to Braavos. Yes, Captain. You know Braavos, only from books. Books are pictures of pictures. The Braavosi books less so than most. They love pictures, but still, pictures. Let me tell you 3 things that are worth 3 lessons and 1 skinning. The first, do not trade with a Braavosi in the morning before he has eaten. The second, the faceless men are real and are not in the tales the way the tales say. The third, a Braavosi will lie to your face about the weather for the pleasure of the thing, but they do not lie about the coin. A Braavosi will die over a coin but will lie for sport about a rainstorm. You will be very tempted to trust a Braavosi with your heart and distrust him with your purse. It is the other way around. I will remember, Captain. Good boy. Valinor drank. I will not ask what you go there for. No, Captain. And I will tell you this one thing because I like your uncle, and I am a fool about such things sometimes. There is a dancing master in Bravos named Sirio Forel. He was the first sword to the Sea Lord for 12 years. He no longer is, because the Sea Lord changed. He teaches boys in his own hall for coin. He will take you if I send a letter. He is the best teacher of the sword in the world. He is also an honest man. In Bravos that is rarer than a dragon. I have no gold. I have gold. Your father sent 2 purses. I will give you one. I will keep the other for a second passage if you need one. Thank you, Captain. Valinor shrugged. Your uncle paid me for 2 passages long ago when I was much younger and much sorrier. I owe him 2. Now go below. There is weather tomorrow. There was weather the next day, and it was bad. The wind drove the Mariposa hard east, and the sea turned the color of a fresh bruise, and the sky put down a low, ugly ceiling that one did not care to look up at. The crew worked in sheets of spray. Jon, given a rope, hauled when they told him to haul and ducked when they told him to duck, and found that his body, which had never been on a deck before, knew a little by instinct of what to do with its feet. He did not vomit, which pleased him more than the men's grudging, approving grunts. On the 3rd morning of the storm, an hour after dawn, a dark shape came up out of the rain off their starboard quarter. A low hull, 2 masts, the sails gone loose and angry. A lean, sharp bow. Pirates, someone said, short, Skegosi. Farther south, out of the stepstones likely, or worse. Valinor was already at the rail, a spyglass at his eye. They are coming. Valinor turned. Snow, hold the stern line. When I tell you, cut it, not before. Do not ask. Do you have your sword? I have my sword. Keep the wolf in the hold. The wolf will come up when I am needed. Then let him go. Jon went. The pirate galley came in on the wind. It was faster than the Mariposa. It was made for speed, made for hunting slower ships, and it had perhaps 20 men on deck and 20 more he could not see. It flew a dirty red pennant. The men at the rail were shouting for surrender in a mix of bastard low Valyrian and sailors' common. An archer at their bow sent 1 arrow across the Mariposa's deck that took a crewman in the shoulder. The man went down screaming. Boarding, Valinor said. His voice was still level. On my call. Jon's sword was in his hand. It was not Longclaw. He had not stayed at the wall long enough for that. It was the blade Mikken had made him in the last week at Winterfell. A long, slender thing, a hand and a half, well-balanced, not elegant, honest. Jon set his back against the aft rail. Ghost came up out of the hold as though he had been listening for precisely the right note and finally heard it. The white direwolf padded to Jon's knee and stood, patient as a winter, his eyes red on the oncoming hull. The ships closed. A grapple came over. The pirates began to come. They were rough men, bearded, stripped to the waist, some with faces Jon could not place for a people, because pirates of the stepstones were of every people. The first one over the rail came at the nearest crewman with a cutlass. Valinor himself took the second, with a short falchion, and opened the pirate's arm from wrist to elbow in the first pass. Jon did not move until 2 of them came for him. The first was a tall, whip-lean man with a long, curved knife. The second was a shorter, broad man with an axe. They worked together the way men work together who have killed together often. The tall one feinted at Jon's face and swept low. The broad one swung his axe at Jon's hip. Jon had time in that breath to think one very clear thought. This is the first time I will put a blade into a man. And he did it. He stepped inside the tall man's feint and caught the sweep on the flat of his sword and drove his left elbow into the tall man's throat. The tall man made a gargling sound and dropped his knife. The broad man's axe came on, and Jon turned and took the axe on his blade and slid it down to the cross. And as Sir Roderick had taught him, 700 mornings in the Winterfell yard, drove his pommel into the broad man's mouth. The broad man's front teeth snapped. He swung again. Wilder and Jon this time cut him. The cut went from the broad man's collarbone to his sternum, and there was a great deal of blood. The broad man looked down at his chest as though at an accounting error, and then dropped. The tall one had recovered. The tall one came at him again. Ghost was a white ghost across the deck, and the tall one died with a direwolf across his shoulders and his neck in Ghost's mouth. After that, Jon moved. He moved up the deck. He moved without thinking about any of it. His feet knew where to be. The blade went in and came out. 2 more pirates died by his sword in the next minute. 1 more died by Ghost. The crew of the Mariposa, who had been for a breath in despair, saw this going on, saw the northern boy and his impossible wolf cutting a channel to the pirate captain, and rallied. Valinor roared. Men ran. The pirate captain was at the mast. He was a big man, bald, scarred across one eye, a long, heavy cutlass in one hand and a short, pistol-looking weapon Jon had not seen before in the other. When Jon came up to him, the captain fired the weapon. Something smaller and faster than an arrow, a small piece of metal in a puff of smoke, took a chunk out of Jon's ear. Jon felt the blood before he felt the pain, and he felt the pain only afterward, as a small, irrelevant thing at the edge of his awareness. He came on. He cut at the captain's knee. The captain parried and countercut at his shoulder. Jon took the cut on his arm, a shallow gash, long and flat, and turned inside the swing and with his full weight, drove his blade through the captain's chest. The captain looked at him, in the moment before he died, with real surprise. "Northman," he said, and then he coughed a red cough and slipped down the sword and was gone. The pirate crew, seeing the captain fall, broke. Those who could still move cut their grapples and fled back to their own ship. Those who could not were killed where they lay. It was over in 6 minutes, though it felt, to Jon, like an afternoon. He stood at the mast with his sword dripping and his arm cut shallow and his ear bloody and Ghost beside him, muzzle red, eyes steady. Valinor came up slowly. The captain of the Mariposa was breathing hard. He looked at Jon's blood. He looked at the dead men around them. He looked at the direwolf. "Jon Rivers," he said flatly, "is not your real name. No, Captain, I did not think it was. No, Captain, you are 16 years old. I am Snow." Valinor said, "If I ever see your real name written down, I will not tell it to any man. For this service, I will ferry you back across the narrow sea any time you like. No gold. For this," he flicked a hand at the bodies, "I will tell every captain in the Purple Harbor that you are not a man to be trifled with. I will tell them you are slow of wit and quick of sword because I like the joke, and because they will ask, and because the joke will keep them honest. Thank you, Captain. Get below. The ship's boy will sew your ear. We are not going to die today. You are," he paused, considering. "You are not dying today either." Jon went below. In the hold, the ship's boy, a skinny Lycene lad named Paro, knelt beside Jon's hammock and sewed the ear with a curved needle and a steady hand, talking to himself in 3 languages as he worked. Ghost watched from a wary crouch and did not interfere. Paro's stitches were neat. When he was done, he grinned with a mouth full of bad teeth and said, "You will have a scar, Northman. Women will like it. If you live, it will cost you only half the trouble most men's scars cost them." "Thank you, Paro. You are welcome." Paro tied off the last stitch, patted Jon's shoulder as a grandmother might, and left. Jon slept a while. He woke to Valinor's boot, not ungentle, against the hammock. "Up, Snow, come see the other ship. The other ship. The pirates, they have drifted. They are low in the water. Come." Jon came up on deck. The storm had blown past. The sun was out, thin and silver. 2 cables off their port side, the pirate galley sat lopsided, her main sheet shredded, her deck empty of living men. Her rudder had been cut in the fight. She drifted, helpless, down the swell. Valinor raised his glass. He lowered it. He looked at Jon, considering. We can leave her or we can take her. Take her. Men, Snow, risky. There may be 24 below, there may be only 4. We have lost a man dead and 2 wounded. We have you who are unknown to me and a wolf. On balance. Take her. Valinor smiled slightly. Your uncle's voice, he said. I had not heard it in some time. Very well, borders away. They took the galley. Jon went over the rail among the second wave. There were 7 men still alive below, 3 of them wounded beyond fighting, 4 of them surly and armed and half-starved. Jon did not kill any of them this time. Ghost and the sheer fact of the direwolf in the passage was enough. The 4 surrendered. The Mariposa's crew put chains on them and stowed them in the aft hold, and went through the galley's cargo compartment by compartment. There was salt, iron ingots, a small sealed chest of Myrish lenses, 8 barrels of Dornish sour wine, a broken ballista, and a crate of women's silks that had plainly been stolen from a Tyroshi merchantman the season before. Valinor noted the manifest with a dry tongue. A year's profit. He said to Jon, in an afternoon's bleeding, You have made me a rich man, Snow. The gods made you rich, Captain. The gods do not carry swords. They set the pirate galley under tow with a short hawser and rigged her a makeshift rudder. And the Mariposa, now slightly heavier and considerably more valuable, came into Bravos a day later than planned, with her prize limping in her wake like a beaten dog on a leash. Far south of where he bled and took a prize in a dim workshop on the Street of Steel in King's Landing, Jon's uncle was examining an apprentice smith's half-finished helm and asking, in a voice carefully not too casual, about the boy's mother. A tavern wench, Lord. She's gone. Died of a fever when I was small. You have her hair, I think. Some say, Lord, I don't know, and your father. I never knew him, Lord. Master Mott tells me he was a highborn. He never told me more. Ned, who had spent years learning how to carry his face without moving it, now carried it without moving it. He looked at the boy, broad-shouldered, bull-necked, hair so black the daylight did not find any other color in it, blue eyes. Every bastard of Robert Baratheon, Ned had learned this past week, had that hair. And this one, big and calm and patient with the hammer, was not a tavern wench's get-alone. Ned had come to the Street of Steel because Jon Arryn had come here first, shortly before he died. Jon Arryn had asked the same questions Ned had asked this morning in the same quiet voice of the same Master Mott, and had been shown the same apprentice. Jon Arryn had died 3 days later. Ned did not intend to die 3 days later. How is the helm? Not finished, Lord. Another hour's work. Finish it tomorrow. And Gendry, Lord, take my word, do not ask after your father's name. No, Lord. And if anyone else should come asking after him, a man in the king's livery, a eunuch with a soft voice, a gaunt man with small, clever eyes, do not answer them. Say that you are only an apprentice. Say that you do not know who your mother was. Say that you do not know who you are. I don't, Lord. Keep it that way, Ned said, for your sake and for mine. Yes, Lord. Ned walked out onto the street with Jory Castle at his back. The city heat was on them. He said nothing until they were 3 corners on. Jory, send a man to the wall in the morning. The wall, my lord, to Lord Commander Mormont, a greeting. He will forward the letter. It is for a friend of my brother Benjen's. You will deliver the sealed letter to Mormont, and you will wait for no reply. Yes, my lord. Ned paused in the shadow of a cooper's arch and wrote, leaning on a barrel, the short cipher he had agreed on with Jon. It was nothing anyone would read twice. It said, Dear Jory, the weather here in the Lannisport counting house is clearer than expected. Their coin is where I feared. The winds are with me. Your cousin Arryn is in good health. Remember the 4th rose on the 4th path. He sealed it. He handed it to Jory. Then he went to find Littlefinger and Varys and every man Robert had set him to dine with, and he did with each of them what any honest lord would do at a dinner table in the Red Keep. He listened. He drank little. He gave back what he was given. And when the evening was done, he returned to the Tower of the Hand and wrote a second letter to Stannis Baratheon, on a raven wing he had had Jory procure in secret, that said nothing at all a man could hang him for, and everything a man like Stannis would understand. Ned had learned in the past year a new skill. He had learned it because his nephew required it of him. He had learned at last to be as patient as the man who had taken 16 years to find an answer to a single question. It was, he found, a skill he should have learned years ago. In the narrow sea, in the belly of a Braavosi trader, Jon Snow lay in a hammock with a clean bandage over his ear and ghost asleep across his legs, and he heard the creak of the timbers and the slap of the water, and for the first time since his father had told him his mother's name. He allowed himself to wonder, only wonder, small and private with a sailor's lamp swinging above him, what his aunt in Pentos looked like, and whether she had eyes like his. Sleep took him quickly. He did not dream. The ship rode on east under a clearing sky. In the morning, the lookout in the crow's nest saw, very far off, a pale smudge on the horizon that was not a cloud, and he cried out. And Jon came up on deck with his sword arm bandaged and ghost at his knee, and he watched the smudge slowly resolve itself through the long, slow approach of a Braavosi vessel into a Braavosi morning, into the enormous shoulders and raised sword of the Titan of Bravos, straddling the mouth of the lagoon, dwarfing the ships that passed between his iron boots. He stood a long time at the rail. The Titan's head turned slowly as the Mariposa glided beneath him. The statue's head did not turn, of course. The turning was the slow change of angle as a ship passes under a mountain. And Jon saw, for a blink, the sun strike the bronze of the Colossus's eye. The eye looked down at them without looking. A gull rose from the sword tip 100 feet up and flew north. From the guardroom set into the Titan's belly, a man in the sea blue and silver of the Braavosi arsenal leaned out and waved a banner. Valinor below raised an answering banner. Names and ciphers were exchanged in shouts across the wind. It was, Jon realized, a border checkpoint. A border checkpoint built inside a god. "I am here," he said, very quietly to no one in particular, and to someone across the water who did not yet know he existed. Ghost, beside him, looked up. The dire wolf's red eyes were very bright in the sea light. The ship slid in between the Titan's legs, and the shadow of the Colossus fell across them, and the water under the hull turned pewter and then blue and then green as they came into the protected inner sea. Jon watched it. He did not speak. Around them, the city rose. Domes of painted tile, spires of pale stone, canals silvered by the afternoon sun, arched bridges laid like harp strings between the islands, the smell of wet limestone and of salt fish and of cumin from a spice quay. The distant shouts of bravos laughing at something on the far side of a bridge. A knot of gondolas pressing past one another in the narrow mouth of a canal. An old woman beating a rug from a fifth-floor balcony. A striped cat on a sun-warmed windowsill. A street musician playing a small stringed thing that was not a harp and not a lute, and had the voice of both. It was the most beautiful thing Jon Snow had ever seen, and his first cold thought, as a Braavosi pilot boarded and Valinor called for lines, was that no one in it could possibly know who he was. Good, he thought. Let me keep that, as long as I can. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. A song of ice and fire in Bravos, a boy from the north learned to dance. The house of Syrio Forel stood on the east side of a small island in the middle quarter, a narrow stone building pressed between a glass-blower's and a confectioner's, with a shallow canal running under its rear wall and a painted sign above its door bearing a single slender iron sword. Behind the door was a training hall with a flagstone floor and windows high on 3 walls, open to the sky. There were no chairs. There were 2 chalk lines on the floor. There were, in a rack along the far wall, some 20 thin blades of a sort Jon had never held in the north, almost rapiers, but lighter and more supple, with a hand and a quarter grip meant for one hand with the other free. Syrio Forel was a small brown man with a shaven head and a close black beard, and a nose that had been broken at some point and set with the careful eye of someone who had enjoyed the exercise. He wore loose trousers and a sleeveless tunic and walked barefoot. He was drinking when Jon came in with his letter from Valinor, a small cup of something that smelled of fermented apples. Syrio read the letter. He snorted. He put the letter in a drawer. "You are a swordsman," he said in the rhythmic common of a Bravosi who has learned the language for pleasure, not for necessity. "Valinor says so. Valinor is a fine judge of wine and a poor judge of swordsmen. Show me." "Show you. Pick up a blade. Come at me." Jon picked up the nearest blade. It was so light in his hand, he thought. For a half-breath, it was a child's toy. He looked up. Syrio was standing with his arms loose and his feet spread, and he was smiling. Jon came at him. 2 breaths later, Jon was on the floor, on his back, staring at the high ceiling with Syrio's blade set gently against his throat. "Ha," said Syrio. "Well, a northern boy, a Westerosi swordsman. You swing as if you are chopping wood, you stand as if you are an ox. You plant your feet as if your feet are the floor. You watch my blade. Why do you watch my blade? To parry it. The blade is a liar. Watch my eyes. Watch my hips. Watch where I am going. The blade is told where to go by the man who holds it. Kill the man, not the blade. Come. Up. Again." Jon got up. He was bruised, breathless, oddly exhilarated. He came again. 2 breaths flat on his back again, Syrio's blade at his throat. "Ha," said Syrio, delighted. "You are teachable. Most Westerosi are not. They stand behind a wall all their life and call it a shield. Very good. You will come every morning, 2 hours after dawn, and every afternoon, 2 hours before dusk, every day, for as long as I am paid and as long as I am amused. Cost is 2 silver stags a day, no less. Also you will bring apples. The apples in Bravo's taste of salt. You will not find me good apples." "I will suffer, master." "Syrio, Syrio, 2 silver stags a day. Does your purse object?" "It does not." "Good, begin now." "I am not a man who waits for tomorrow," he began. He trained for 2 hours and ate a short cold meal of fried fish and flatbread at the stall by the canal and went back and trained for 2 hours more. He bled his fingers on the hilt. He fell a dozen times. He began, faintly in the 3rd hour, to understand what Syrio meant about the eyes. By the end of the afternoon he had put the tip of his blade against Syrio's collarbone once, and Syrio laughed like a child. "Ha, the northern boy surprises me. Tomorrow the surprise will not come. Tomorrow you will have to find a new one. That is how this works." "Yes, Syrio." "Good, go, sleep. Drink not. If you drink tonight I will smell it on you in the morning, and I will whip you with the flat of my blade, and it will be a very bad day." Jon did not drink. He went back through the narrow streets to his lodgings, an upper room above a ropemaker's shop in the Ragman's harbor. 4 copper pennies a week, a bed hard as a ship's deck, a window that let in the gulls in the morning, and he had to stop once on the way because a pair of bravos, drunk on something sweet in green bottles, barred his path on an arched bridge. The older one stepped into Jon's way with a theatrical bow. "A gentleman of the north, by his cloak. A gentleman would grant me the honor of a single pass. I do not fight in the street, sir." "Ha." The younger of the 2 laughed. "He does not fight in the street. Well, we do. We will take your purse now then, since you do not fight." Jon looked at them. He was tired. He was in a city that was not his. He had been thrown on his back a dozen times in an afternoon. He was not inclined tonight to lose a purse. "I have no purse to give you, sir." "Ha." the older Bravo drew. It was a quick practice draw. Jon had, against his will, only the sword Mikken had made him. It was not a Braavosi blade. It would not dance on the narrow bridge. But Jon did not need it to dance. He needed it only to defend one life on a narrow bridge, and he had been taught, by his father's master-at-arms and this afternoon by Syrio Forel, how to defend a narrow bridge. He drew. The older Bravo's first pass was a flashy feint at Jon's eyes. Jon did not look at the blade. He looked at the hips. The hips were going left. The real strike was coming to his left ribs. Jon stepped inside and took the strike on his guard and drove his pommel up under the Bravo's chin. The Bravo's head snapped back. His blade dropped. He fell onto the bridge flat. The younger one looked at his friend. He looked at Jon. He looked for a breath longer than he wanted to at the white shape that had just come up out of the shadow behind Jon. He turned and ran. Jon stood on the bridge with his sword in his hand and a Bravo face down at his feet. Ghost, beside him, did not seem to have hurried. Jon let his breath out slowly, wiped his blade on the fallen Bravo's jerkin and sheathed it. He bent, plucked the Bravo's purse from his belt, half a silver and a handful of coppers, and dropped it on the Bravo's back. "Pay your apprentice better, master," he said to the unconscious Bravo. "He cannot keep a feint." He went home. Ghost lay under the bed with his chin on his paws. Jon had instructed him, in quiet repeated lessons over the passage, that in Bravos he was to move only at night. In the day he was to be invisible in the upper room or in the roof space above it, where a trapdoor gave him access to a run of flat rooftops that extended several streets. The direwolf had understood. The direwolf understood more every day. A coded letter from his father came in the 10th morning he woke in Bravos. It was delivered by a small Lycene boy with eyes the color of cornflowers who had been paid a silver to bring it, and sworn to bring it only to a northern man above the ropemaker's shop with a white dog. The boy took the silver and the bread Jon gave him and left whistling. Jon broke the seal and read the letter slowly by the window. It was 3 close lines. It was addressed to Jory. "Dear Jory, the weather here is worse than expected. The kennels are full and the dogs are sick. My brother has left his house on the quiet road. The 4th rose on the 4th path is dying. If you can carry the rose you once brought me, carry it east, not south. I love you well." Jon read it 3 times. Each line was a cipher he had rehearsed with his father in the last 2 nights at Winterfell. "The weather is worse than expected. Open war is closer than I feared. The kennels are full and the dogs are sick. The Lannisters have moved, some of them are dead, others will be. My brother has left his house on the quiet road. Stannis has fled King's Landing and has declared openly. The 4th rose on the 4th path is dying. The king, Robert, the 4th rose had been their cipher for Robert since Jon was a boy. A reference to an old song is dying or dead. If you can carry the rose you once brought me, carry it east, not south. Your path is east, not back to Westeros. I love you well." Jon lowered the letter. He set it on the small table by the window. He looked at Ghost. "Father," he said. Ghost raised his white head. "Father is in danger. Robert is dead or very nearly. There is war. The direwolf watched him, and he has told me east. He has told me." Jon swallowed. "He has told me not to come." Ghost rose and padded across the floorboards to his knee and set his head under Jon's hand. Jon's fingers moved in the thick white fur without his mind attending them. In his mind, his father sat at a writing desk in the Tower of the Hand. His father wrote 3 short lines at great risk to himself. His father chose, between the heart in him that wanted his son at his side, and the sense in him that knew his son must not be the side his sense had taken. He trusted, in writing those 3 lines, that Jon would hear him. "If you can carry the rose you once brought me, carry it east, not south." Jon read the letter a 4th time. Then he burned it in the small fire and ground the ashes with a poker and sat at the window and watched the gulls for a long time. He went to training that afternoon anyway. Syrio read his face and did not speak of it. Syrio beat him more gently than usual for the first hour. In the second, as if having decided Jon had had enough sympathy, he beat him harder than usual and said at the end, wiping his brow with a cloth, "Ha! Good. Grief is a teacher too if you do not let it teach you the wrong lesson." "What is the wrong lesson?" "That you are alone. Grief tells everyone this. It is the only lie grief tells. Do not listen." "Yes, Syrio." Syrio looked at him a moment, then said, "Go home, sleep, eat meat, drink water. Tomorrow." He went. On the 13th day he counted days in Bravos the way a sailor counts watches, with a small private chalk mark on a rafter. Jon received his second letter. This one was not addressed to Jory. This one was sealed with a seal he did not know. A silver fist on blue. It came by a smiling old Bravosi courier with a quill feather in his cap. It said, "Snow, your brother's father is dying. Your father is in a black cell. The one you were told to seek is east of Pentos, riding with a call. Your uncle at the wall is missing. Your cousin is well. The game has begun. I owe you nothing, and yet I send this. You may wonder why. Wonder carefully. A friend who watches." Jon held the letter in his hand a long time. His pulse had gone steady and very slow, the way it had gone steady and very slow on the deck of the Mariposa when the pirates came over the rail. He read it again. He read it a fourth time. "Your brother's father is dying, Robert, in a black cell. The dungeons beneath the Red Keep. Your father is in a black cell. Your father is in a black cell." His father, the man who had ridden with him in the wolfswood, the man whose letter he had burned this morning. No, not this morning, 3 mornings ago, was in a black cell. The one you were told to seek is east of Pentos, riding with a call, Deaneries. Your uncle at the wall is missing. Benjen. Your cousin is well. Rob, the game has begun. Who was this friend who watched? Jon did not at first know. He turned the sealed wax over in his hand. A silver fist on blue, blue. Many Westerosi houses used blue. The fist suggested a knightly insignia perhaps, but it was not the insignia of any Lord Jon knew by heart. A silver fist on a blue field. He called up his Septon's book of arms in his mind and went through it slowly. A silver fist on blue, House Glover. No. House Glover bore a silver mailed fist on red. Silver fist on blue was Varys. The spider did not have a personal seal. The spider signed nothing, sealed nothing. The spider sent letters through intermediaries and left them unsigned. No, not Varys. Jon went through, one by one, the men who had been in Winterfell the day the king came. Littlefinger was a mockingbird, gray on green. Renly was a stag. Stannis was a stag. Tyrion was a lion. Jaime was a lion. The hounds was 3 black dogs. And the Kingsguard commander, who had ridden in quietly behind the king, and spoken to no one Jon had noticed, Barristan Selmy's personal arms had been a silver fist on a blue field since his grandfather's day. The House Selmy sigil. It was a minor sigil. Jon had seen it only twice, once in a book and once on a shield in a corner of the Winterfell armory. Barristan, who had served Aerys. Barristan, who had fought beside Rhaegar. Barristan, who was, as men at the wall had said once, the only man of the Mad King's court who had stayed a true knight through all of it. Barristan, who had then carried the white cloak for Robert too, for 16 years, because he had taken a vow. Barristan, who was in the Kingsguard, and who had seen Ned's bastard at the end of a line in Winterfell one afternoon, and had, apparently, seen more than Jon had thought he was seeing. Jon's hand closed on the letter. How many men had looked at him in that line, he thought, and seen more than a bastard? Tyrion, faintly. Cersei, in inventory. Barristan in what? In recognition of a face he had known once. Rhaegar's face in his wife's hair, at a boy in his friend's household. Barristan had known Rhaegar better than any other living man had known him. Barristan had fought beside him. Barristan had seen him lift a harp. Barristan had seen him on a horse and on a throne and on a saddle pad as a child. And Barristan had chosen, at some moment after that, to write to Jon Snow in bravos. Why? Jon did not know. Jon's mind worked at it very slowly, as he had learned to make his mind work at things that might kill him if he worked at them fast. Wonder carefully, the letter had said. Wonder carefully. An injunction and a gift. Barristan was not telling Jon how to trust him. Barristan was telling Jon to wonder, a friend who watches. Or perhaps the next letter would not come, and there would be only this one. And Jon would understand in a week's time or a year's that Barristan had meant to tell him only. You are not alone in knowing. It was enough for now. He went to Syrio in the afternoon with the letter burned. Syrio saw the face. Syrio did not say a word. He worked Jon harder than ever, 3 hours in. Jon was lying on the floor for the 10th time, and Syrio was laughing at him. And Jon, breathing hard, lying on his back with a bruise already swelling on his ribs, found himself laughing too, the way he had laughed with Robb in the yard at Winterfell as a very small boy. It was the first true laugh since the wolfswood. It passed through him like a clean wind. "Ha," said Syrio. "The northern boy laughs. It is a joy, Master Syrio. Syrio, there is something I must tell you, yes. Last night I put down a bravo on the thieves' bridge." "Ha." Syrio's eyebrows went up and came down. Was he a good bravo? He was not very good. How not good? He telegraphed his feint. His apprentice ran. "Ha," Syrio nodded slowly. "A fine beginning. A bad bravo is worth a dozen lessons. You did not kill him. No, good. Killing in the street makes the city hate you. Hurting in the street makes the city fear you. Fear is a better tool. Who knew of it? No one alive, I think. No one alive. Good. The bravo is not dead." He was breathing. "I did not take his purse." Pity. A bravo's purse is often a treasure. "Master, I had a reason." "Tell it." "I do not want a reputation here." Syrio studied him. A very slow smile spread over his brown face, a smile Jon had not seen before, the smile of a teacher whose pupil has, at last, said something the teacher thought he was 3 months too young to say. "Ha," said Syrio softly. "Ha. You are a clever boy, Jon Snow. I will miss you when you are gone." Jon looked at him. "I am going east soon." "East, you say, to Pentos, perhaps farther." Syrio's eyes went half-lidded. "Who are you looking for in the east, Jon Snow of the wolfswood?" "Family." "Your family is in the north. This is other family." Syrio studied him a moment. "Ha. It would be Pentos if I did not know better, but from your face it is farther." "Vise Dothrak, then." "Do not go to Vise Dothrak on a horse you do not love. The sea of grass will eat an unloved horse in 10 days. Do not go to Vise Dothrak alone. Find a caravan going to the Mother of Mountains. Pay well. Lie about yourself convincingly. Dothraki cannot raid, which is a great advantage to a liar. Do not wear silver. Do not say the name Targaryen aloud. Do not." He stopped. Syrio was looking at Jon with a very still, very unfriendly kind of stillness. The little bravosi sword in his hand, which had been idle, had drifted up a fraction of an inch as if by its own accord. Jon did not move. "Ha," Syrio said softly. "Ha, it is none of my business. I will not ask. I will not teach you further. I will keep your silver. I will write to you 2 letters of introduction, one to a man in Pentos, and one to a caravan master who will take you to Vise Dothrak. I will say to these men that you are my Westerosi student and are not to be killed unless you kill first. That is all I will do. Do not ever come back to Bravos, Jon Snow of the wolfswood. For my life, not only for yours." "Yes, Syrio. Go, pack, tonight." Jon bowed very low and left. Syrio wrote the 2 letters in the back room. He sealed them with a little seal Jon had not seen before, the sigil of a swordfish leaping, and gave them to Jon at the door without a smile. Valor Morgulais. Valor Dohaeris. They did not shake hands. Syrio closed the door. On his way home from Syrio's, he stopped at the small, high-ceilinged counting house of a Braavosi banker to whom Valinor had introduced him. The banker, a neat man with pale hair and a tongue like a ledger, listened to Jon's brief request and counted, without comment, 40 gold Westerosi dragons out of a drawer and into a small leather bag, against a paper Jon signed in a practiced hand as Jon Rivers of White Harbor. Repayment. The banker asked, "A year if all goes well, never if it does not. We insure the never." "At what cost?" "A letter when you reach your destination, telling us only that you are alive and that we may expect our interest in Essosi coin. We do not require the coin. We require only the letter. We find it illuminating to know which of our debtors survives their decisions." "Agreed." "Very good." The banker slid the bag across the counter with 2 fingers. "Valor Morgulais, traveler. Valor Dohaeris." That night Jon did not sleep. He walked the canals. Ghost walked with him, pale as a rumor, slipping behind him through the shadows of the lower town. He stopped once at the edge of the purple harbor and watched the lights of the anchored ships ride on the black water. He thought of his father in a cell. He thought of Robb alone at Winterfell with a hall full of grief and a mother gone south and 3 younger children. He thought of Sansa and Arya, somewhere, either in the Red Keep or on a road in whatever trap the Lannisters had closed. He thought of Benjen missing. He thought of Viserys riding wherever he was now with whatever cruelty was on his face this morning. He thought of a girl with silver hair, riding with a Khal, pregnant perhaps, young, alone among 100,000 strangers. He thought of Ned's last words to him, in his chamber at Winterfell. "You live. That is my order." If he rode west, he could be in King's Landing in 6 weeks with the best horse coin could buy. He could ride into the city in a gray hood and find Varys in the secret passages under the Red Keep and ask for a way into the black cells. He could try to cut his father out. He could die in the attempt and take his father's chance with him. Or he could ride east. East was 100 days hard travel, and an unknown girl with dragon's blood in a strange sea of grass. East was a prince of his own house whom he had never met, who might be a worse enemy than a Lannister. East was the rumor his father had taught him to seek since the wolfswood. When his father had said, carefully, "Find your aunt if she lives." East was time and distance, and the possibility of a kind of power that Westeros did not understand, and the absolute certainty of not reaching his father in time. A friend who watches. Barristan was in King's Landing. Barristan was at his father's side. Barristan, if Barristan was the friend, was the best man in the 7 kingdoms with a sword. If Barristan chose to act, he could take his father out of the black cells more surely than Jon ever could, or Barristan would not act. Barristan might watch. Barristan might write another letter later with the name of a new king on it. Jon stood at the edge of the harbor a long time. He thought, "I could never move fast enough." My father knew that. My father's letter had said east before he was taken. My father had known when he wrote that letter that he would very likely fall. My father had given me the only gift he had left, which was a direction. Live. Jon said the word aloud very quietly over the water. Live. Ghost pressed against his leg. East, Jon said. He went back to the upper room above the rope-makers. He packed. He rolled his extra tunic and his wool cloak and his cipher book and his father's short dagger into a saddle roll. He counted his coin. He had enough for passage to Pentos in comfort and for a good horse and for a week's hire of a caravan guard. If he ran out, he would earn more. His sword was, as he had learned in the storm, a coin of its own. He wrote a short letter to Valinor, leaving it at the desk with a silver stag on top, thanking him for 3 days of hospitality and a lesson at the storm and the loan of a purse. He wrote a second letter that he did not send, to Robb. It said only, "Your brother loves you. Stay in Winterfell. Do not go south to chase our father. I will come back." He held the letter a long time and then he put it in the fire. He burned a lock of his own black hair in the fire too, though he did not know why he did it. It was a northern custom, he had been told once, that a man leaving a country for the first time left a piece of himself behind so that the country would remember him and let him return. He did not believe the custom. He did it anyway. Before dawn he was at the Ragman's harbor, where a merchant ship bound for Pentos was making ready to sail on the tide. The captain was a plump Pentoshi with a kind face and a single gold earring, and he did not ask many questions. He knew Valinor. He knew Valinor paid for silences. He put Jon below in a small private cabin, a kindness, rare, and put Ghost in the cargo hold with a bowl of water and a side of salt pork, and set sail on the morning wind with his striped crimson sail snapping full. Jon stood at the stern as the Titan receded behind them. The sun came up over the horizon ahead, and the water under the bow turned gold. Braavos became a model of itself, and then a smudge, and then a glint on the western horizon. Gulls flew with them for an hour and then fell behind. Jon stood. Ghost came up from below somewhere in the middle of the morning, despite the crew's orders, and sat at Jon's hip, and no one objected. The crew, after one careful look, went back to their lines. Jon thought, as the sun climbed, of every face he was leaving behind. Ned in a black cell. Robb in Winterfell, learning to be a lord at 17. Sansa in the Red Keep, learning what cruelty wore the face of a prince. Arya, who was Arya and would not go without a fight. Bran broken and perhaps never again to walk. Rickon, alone at a gate. Catelyn, with her hand bandaged, riding somewhere with a small army of loyal Tullys. His father's oldest friend dying or dead. His father's oldest enemy rising. A friend who watches, holding a letter in a white-gloved hand. A dancing master closing his door for the last time on a pupil who had brought something into the house that the pupil had not known to leave outside. And across the water, east and east and east, a girl. A girl of 14 or 15. Dany was what Viserys had called her. Ned had told him, riding beside a horse lord under a burning sky, perhaps with a child already quickening under her heart, perhaps not. An ant he had never seen and who did not know he existed. The last other living dragon of a house that had once ruled the world. He did not know what she would be. He did not know if she would love him or hate him or kill him. He did not know if he could save her or she could save him. He did not know if, when they met, she would be a young woman frightened of her brother, or a young woman already become something hard and new. He knew only that his father had said, "East." He knew only that the last Targaryens in the world had a chance of finding each other before their enemies did, and a chance of doing something with that meeting that could not yet be named and could not yet be planned. He knew only that a wolf that had come out of the snow at Winterfell had followed him here to Braavos across a sea he had not known existed 3 moons ago. And he thought, with a small, cold, new clarity, of a moment from the upper gallery of Winterfell. Cersei Lannister looking him full in the eye and saying, "You have your Lord Father's eyes." He had believed her, at the time, to mean Ned. Now, standing in a breeze that smelled of salt and salt and salt, he understood she might have meant something else. She had been a 16-year-old girl at the Trident. She had stood at the tourney at Harrenhal when a prince of silver hair had crowned her rival in love with winter roses. Cersei Lannister had, all her life, remembered Rhaegar's face better than any woman's pride should have allowed. She had been telling him, in that polite gallery voice, "I remember him too." The difference between her and Barristan was what each had chosen to do with the memory. Jon would have to be ready when he came back, if he came back for both of them. He knew only that he was Jaehaerys Targaryen, son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, raised a Stark by a man who had chosen him over his own marriage bed for 16 years, and that whatever that name was worth in the world, it was worth something on the wind at the edge of a ship leaving Bravos at dawn. "Live," he said again, into the wind. "Find her. Learn." Ghost looked up at him with red eyes, and then, Jon said, "Then we will see what becomes of those who put my father in a black cell." Ghost's ear flicked. The direwolf did not blink. In King's Landing, his father lay in a black cell on wet straw and composed in his head a fourth letter to a boy across the sea whom he would not live to send it to. He watched the water seeping down the wall. He thought of a sister in a bed of blood, of a promise he had kept, and of a nephew he had told the truth to just in time. Nothing else he had done in his life had made him so content. In Winterfell, his eldest son stood on the battlements at dusk and looked south, at a road that the Hand's party had taken and no news from. A raven had come an hour before. He had not yet read it. He could see, in his mind's eye, the cipher of a silver fist on blue, though he did not know the house. He was 17. He was calling his banners. On a lonely tower in the neck, a short cranogman with hair and feathers in his hat looked up from a letter and drew a long, slow breath. Howland Reed read the letter twice. He put it into the fire. He went outside and stood in the rushes and looked north, and then he looked east, and then, with his lips set in a small, firm line, he began to think about which of his men he would send where. At the wall, a raven came into the rookery with the Lannister seal broken on its cord, and a very polite question from Lord Tywin as to what had happened to the household of the Hand's household. Maester Aemon held the letter in his blind old hands a long moment. Then he lifted it to his nose and smelled the ink. He put it on the coals and watched, with whatever dim heat vision his blind eyes still possessed, the light of the letter going out. He said nothing to anyone about it that day, or any day after. On the Dothraki Sea, far ahead of the merchant ship bearing a northern boy and his white wolf, the grass went on and on and on in the wind like a second sea, and the silver-haired girl walking among her Khals horses did not know why she felt, this morning, a small settled warmth behind her breastbone she had never felt before, but she noticed it and wondered and went on with her day. In the sky above Castle Black, a raven flew east. It carried no message. It had been loosed simply because the Maester's boy had been careless with a cage. It did not know why it flew east. It flew east because the wind did that morning, and the bird had no better idea. On a plain between Pentos and the Dothraki Sea, a girl with silver hair stood on a flat-topped hill in the early sun and watched the grass move in the wind and thought, for the first time, in a voice that was her own and not her brother's, "I am not afraid." She put her hand on her belly. A life was in her, a whole new life. She looked at the eastern horizon and said aloud to the hill and to the grass and to the Khal sleeping in his tent below her, "I am a Targaryen. I am the blood of the dragon. I do not need to be afraid." She did not know about the boy on the ship. The boy on the ship did not know about her. The sun climbed. The ship sailed on. Ghost put his head down on Jon's boot. Jon set his hand on the direwolf's skull. The wind out of the west was steady. The sea under the hull was calm. A great gull, strayed farther out than they usually went, came and settled on the foremast yard and regarded them with yellow eyes. Jon regarded him back. "You are welcome," Jon said gravely, "as long as you pay your own passage." The gull cried once and lifted off and flew on east ahead of them, and Jon watched it go until it became a small white dot, and then nothing. He stayed at the stern a while longer. Then he turned and walked forward along the deck to the prow. He set both hands on the rail. The wind took his cloak and tugged at it. The rising sun put a long gold strip across the eastern water, straight from where Pentos would be to where he stood. He breathed in. He breathed out. A boy of 16 named Jon Snow had left Winterfell 3 months ago. A boy of 16 named Eddard Targaryen, who had also been Jon Snow, stood on a ship's prow in the morning sun with a direwolf at his heel, and a grown man's face and a grown man's grief, and a grown man's cold, clear plan. There was a war behind him. There was his father in a cell behind him. There was a throne behind him, in a city he had never seen, that he had decided he would see one day on his own terms. Ahead of him there was a sea. Ahead of him there was a grass. Ahead of him there was a girl and a brother he had never met and a fight he could not yet imagine the shape of. He was ready for none of it, and he was ready for it. He thought of his father one more time, in a damp cell under a city he had never seen, waiting to be used as a piece in a game Ned had never chosen to play. He thought of his father's hand on his shoulder in the wolfswood. He thought of the last instruction, live. "I will live," Jon said aloud, to the wind, to the water, to his father whom the wind and water could not reach. "I will live and I will come back." He was 16 years old. He had 6 hours a day with a blade, a direwolf who could kill any man in the world, a father's letter burned and memorized, a seal of a silver fist on blue, a dead pirate's sword at his back, and a promise a dying woman had made to her brother in a tower in Dorne that had, at last, made its way back to the one person in the world it had been made for. Ned Stark, in his dark cell, smiled once, the first time in weeks, because a thought had come to him suddenly, unbidden, a thought about a boy on a ship he could not see, a thought that made the straw around him feel for a moment almost warm. "I kept your promise, Lyanna," he said to the damp stones. "I kept your promise." In the east, far ahead of the ship, the sun cleared the horizon fully, and the strip of gold on the water widened and widened until the whole eastern sea was one great sheet of fire. Jon Snow stood in it. He was the last dragon of his line. He was the nephew of a man in chains. He was the brother of a boy who would, within the month, call himself king in the north. He was the son of a dead prince and a dead princess who had loved each other, for better or for worse, enough to break a kingdom. He was the bearer of his own true name and the bearer of his borrowed one, and he had learned under a weirwood in the wolfswood how to carry them both. He was riding east to find his aunt. He was riding east also to find out what he was. Ghost pressed his head against Jon's hip. Jon stood straight in the morning wind. "Eastward," he said softly to the sun. The ship went on. The wind was steady out of the west. The gold on the water did not fade. A long time after, when the tale of what he did next had been told 100 ways and half of them wrong, men would remember that the first act of the boy who would one day be called many things had been the simplest of them. That he had stood at the prow of a ship at dawn. That he had kept the promise a dying mother had given a brother 17 years before. That he had gone east to find an aunt who did not yet know she had him. And that whatever came of it, whatever kingdoms rose or fell after, he had begun it by standing straight in a wind he did not fear, with a direwolf at his side and his father's voice in his ear, saying only, "Live."